Township, and I've kind of been, whether I like it or not, the master of ceremonies for this hearing. And I just want to say that, begin by saying that we are going to continue this hearing tonight. Hopefully, the applicant will finish their testimony tonight. I don't know that that's going to happen because everybody has the right to question whatever witnesses that the applicant puts on. But my goal is to try to get this finished tonight. As you know, if you've been here before, we have a kind of house rule that we end this at 9 o'clock. We do 3 hours and then we end it. And then if we need another hearing, we schedule another hearing. In anticipation of the potential for the applicant finishing tonight, I would like to have another night for testimony, and you folks that are here as objectors or participants would have the right at that time to put on whatever case you want to put on. You could make a statement, you could put in exhibits, you could call witnesses, but we're not going to do that tonight. That's going to be another night. I think tonight we're just going to hopefully have the applicant finish their testimony. I've consulted with Attorney Fox that represents the applicant. We would agree that the next date for hearing this matter would be April the 2nd at 6 p.m. at this same location. And so if you want to come in and participate, if you establish yourself as a participant, and we have a list of people that are participants, you will be able to say what you want, put evidence on, put witnesses on at that time. So that I just want to make that known now. That will be April 2nd of 2024. I would also like to state that we had this hearing scheduled for February the 13th. That is tonight's hearing. And we had to adjourn that because that was the night, if you recall, was a snowstorm during the morning, and because we decided, in light of all the people here driving and so forth, that we would continue it until tonight. And we did post a notice of that on the door of this establishment, as well as the door of the municipal building in Polk Township, as well as put it on the Polk Township website. And I'm going to mark as Township Exhibit number 11 that notice. I don't have it with me tonight, but we will mark it and make that an exhibit in this case. So tonight, the last we were here, counsel for the applicant had presented a witness, and I believe that witness had finished. That was Mr. Ojerkus. There was also some testimony from Mr. Simmons. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to open the hearing. I'm going to turn the hearing over to Mr. Fox, and he can present whatever remaining testimony he has. Again, it's our hope that we can finish this tonight. There's no guarantee that that's going to occur, but that at least is my goal starting out. So at this time, I would turn the matter over to Mr. Fox and ask if he has any additional evidence to present.
Sure, thank you, Jim. Is this on?
How about now?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you, Jim. Tonight we have two witnesses. I'll provide ask for some further testimony from Mr. Chris Simmons, who's to my right, development manager for Samsung, particularly on this project. Some supplemental information on an emergency response plan as requested during the last hearing by Chief Tippett of this fire company. And also will present testimony of one of our engineers, Tom Cadelhan, to my left, regarding glare analysis and also how that will be reviewed in accordance with the ordinance post-construction and measures for mitigation. Are there any questions of me before I begin further examination of Mr. Simmons? Great, thank you. And Chris, do you mind restating your full name and position with Effort Solar?
My name is Chris Simmons. I'm a development manager for Samsung C&T America.
And do you recall that you were still under oath from the last hearing?
Yes.
So regarding some potential concerns raised by the residents and objectors in prior hearings regarding the material composition of the solar panels, are you able to describe what the components are and what the solar panels would be made of here?
Yes, the 6 components are described as the following. We use solar photovoltaic cells. They are monocrystalline, pure silicon crystals.
What was the name of the crystal?
monocrystalline pure silicon crystal. Toughened glass, 3 to 3.5 millimeters thick. Glass is also made with some silicone. Extruded aluminum frame. It's aluminum alloy used in many everyday products and items. The encapsulation or EVA film layer and plastic layer used over the panel. Polymer rear back sheet made of various polymers and plastics, and a junction box to bring the diodes in.
So it's a layered construction that doesn't contain any toxic materials, is that correct?
Correct.
And you've not yet selected a type of panel for this facility, is that correct?
Correct.
And that would be done based upon timing of approvals and what is available in the market, is that correct?
Correct.
But at the time of selection, we would be able to provide either a material safety data sheet or a spec sheet of the panel for the township professional to review, is that correct? And is it also true that any and all electronic equipment used in these types of facilities requires some sort of certification, either from the FCC or Federal Communications Commission regarding electromagnetic interference? Pardon me, and that's also a document that will be provided to the township once the type of panel is selected, is that correct?
Can you hear me now? Yes. All right. Sorry, guys.
Going back on. And is it your understanding then that because the certification mark from the SEC that will necessarily comply with FCC regulations and will not then cause interference with radio, television, or cellular service?
Yes, the equipment will comply and will not cause interference.
And then the panels themselves, are you familiar with a UL or Underwriters Laboratory certification?
Yes.
Will the panels be UL certified?
Yes.
And that's also able to be documented to the township?
Correct.
And will the final land development plans, now shifting to emergency services and emergency response, will the final plans include circulating roads to allow EMS and fire trucks to maneuver on the property without having to make multi-point turns?
Correct. We'll include these in the land development plans.
And so that would be circulation, and that can be done once we know there's a conditional use approval. If we get approval for the conditional use, the land development design would incorporate those types of details. Is that correct?
Correct.
And at a previous hearing, initial testimony was given regarding a potential 3-hour response time for emergency response. And do you recall that testimony?
Yes.
And has that been reviewed in order to be improved upon?
Yes.
And what would Effort Solar propose to improve that response time?
We will coordinate with the local fire departments to minimize response times.
And part of the ordinance requires a phone number, notification, contact in place at all times. That would be part of an emergency response plan.
Correct.
And is there any sort of system in place to alert of a fire issue quickly and then communicate with the fire company or local EMS services?
Yes, we'll plan on accommodating smoke, flame, heat, gas detection systems, as well as communication systems with the local fire department.
And that would involve coordinating and making sure there are open lines of communication with the local fire company as part of an emergency response plan. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then regarding the maintenance of the grass on the property, earlier testimony was provided that perhaps grazing animals or some such thing would be the modality. Is that no longer the case?
Yes, they are no longer considered.
So what would be the maintenance plan to keep the grass at an orderly height?
We will hire a mowing company to maintain the grass conditions on the property.
And you were here at the last hearing, correct?
Correct.
Do you recall Chief Tippett of the Polk Township Volunteer Fire Company requesting some example of a fire safety plan or emergency plan that they could review?
Yes.
Did we provide one?
Yes.
And I'm going to ask, I believe we are up to Exhibit 8. I have an example at Exhibit 9. It's an example of an emergency response plan from Effort Solar from another Samsung project, and this is being provided as an example of what we like to do with the local fire company and in coordination with the township to create an emergency response plan. If I can just take a second and hand that up. All right, so thank you, Chris. And do you recall that this was provided to the township and has to be provided to the Polk Township Volunteer Fire Company?
Yes.
So are you familiar with this example from the Solus Kingston Solar Project Fire Safety and Emergency Response Plan?
Yes.
Can you generally summarize what that includes?
For first responders, what we would try to communicate the most is the entrance and access points all around the solar farm. Make sure they have room for their equipment. Sorry, I'm not in the microphone. Make sure they have room for their equipment to get in and out of the facility. We usually have Knox boxes placed around the perimeter in gated areas to where they'll always have access, have key or keypad access to get into the facility. And then points of different parts of the project where we could potentially de-energize certain parts, whether it be at the inverter stations, substations, or the solar arrays themselves.
So the idea of the emergency response plan is fair to say it's a review of the solar facility, discussion with the local fire company as far as what equipment and training is on hand and available, and working cooperatively to make sure that emergency measures are able to be taken and the solar facility is able to be handled in the event of an emergency. Is that fair?
Yes.
And that's something, if a condition was imposed on us as the applicant, Effort Solar would agree to put something similar together with the local fire company. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then there were some initial considerations given to emergency response. Is that correct?
Yes.
And do you recall the conditional use plans that had some notes on them?
Yes.
And if I can direct you, and these were the conditional use plans that were submitted with the application and were submitted in our initial package at Exhibit 1 or Tab 1. On Site Detail Sheet 1, can I ask you to take a look at general notes 8, 9, and 10?
Yes, shall I reel it out?
Yeah, if you mind reading general notes 8, 9, and 10 out loud.
General note 8, the Knox box shall be located at or near the recognized public entrance to the property. 9, in no case shall the Knox box be located at a height of less than 4 feet from the ground or more than 6 feet from the ground. All other locations for the Knox box shall be approved by the fire marshal. And 10, provide access keys to the fire marshal to be secured into the Knox box. A separate key shall be provided to the police chief, and a separate submaster key shall be provided to the chief of police, and a separate key to the director of emergency medical services.
And so what is a Knox box, in case anyone's not familiar?
It's a small mounted safe that holds keys for first responders to quickly retrieve during emergency situations.
So in other words, it's a way for emergency services personnel to access the property without having to contact the property owner.
Yes.
And is that a standard emergency measure
Yes.
for your facilities?
Yes.
And then is it fair to say, based on what you read, that consideration has been given to the location, height, and overall accessibility to the solar facility for emergency services?
Yes.
And that's generally the initial starting place for an emergency response plan, correct?
Correct.
And then is it your experience that this is typically revisited during the land development process to confirm, one, satisfaction to the local emergency services and fire company, and also two, to make sure that if there is a final plan, that the emergency response plan matches up to what is actually to be constructed, correct?
Correct.
And based on your experience, is it the appropriate time to do that during the land development process, once you know what some of the parameters are going to be?
Yes.
And again, forgive me for being repetitive, is it your testimony that Effort Solar would agree to cooperate with Polk Township Fire Company and Township to prepare an emergency response plan as requested verbally at the last hearing?
Yes.
I have no further questions for you, and would ask the board if they have any questions for Mr. Simmons.
I thought of this when we had the snowstorm. They would have to be plowed after snowstorms, so you'd have to contract with somebody to also plow the roads.
Correct. Yeah, any of our access roads have to be included in the maintenance plan given on wherever we're developing, whether it's snow removal or anything similar.
I guess my question is storage of water to fight a fire, or we just put a development in last year and they put underground storage. I mean, have you ever done anything like that, put storage in, or?
We haven't put in storage yet, but that's part of the land development plan process for this project, as we coordinate with the township and the fire department to make sure that adequate resources were available.
Okay, because we had a restaurant burned down years ago, and they went to the school and they actually tapped the tank pretty hard. The school was not happy, but we needed the water. And
Understood.
I had just one or two quick questions. Mr. Simmons, you testified that the panels would be UL certified. Can you tell us what the significance of the UL certification is?
Underwriter laboratories determine the safety of the panels. They look at toxicity characteristics, environmental concerns, anything like that, anything of that nature. So the UL certification will provide more information about what goes into the panels and any potential, effects that people might think that they have. So those certifications will show that they are, in fact, environmentally friendly.
At the last hearing, I had asked whether there had been any fires in any of the facilities that your company has developed, and whoever answered that, I believe it was Mr. Junn, said that he did not know and they would get back to us. Do you have any information on that?
We have not seen any fires at any of our facilities.
Thank you. All right, we're now going to open up questions to the public here, and we're going to do the same thing we've done in past meetings, as I'm going to read the list of folks that have registered an appearance in this case, and they will have the opportunity to ask questions. I would suggest that if you're asking questions, if you could come up to the front here so everybody can see you and can hear you. So we're going to start with Truman Burnett III.
Just gonna ask, where's the water gonna come from?
So that is something that we'll have to work on with the local fire department and the township to make sure that there are adequate resources available.
As you said, you're not drilling any wells.
Correct.
Joseph Balzano Sr.
Yes. You have any questions? No.
No questions?
No.
Jennifer Carey.
I'm back here. Can you just give us a little information about how and why you select certain panels?
We choose monocrystalline panels because they're typically the most efficient. So they're going to produce the most amount of power for the longest amount of time. So it's output related. They are generally, safe across the board. They don't have any toxic materials, anything that would possibly contaminate the environment or water supply or anything like that. So we use them for their efficiency and their durability.
Early on in the hearing, there was discussion about the panels were going to be, I forget what they're called, but in motion. And more recently, perhaps not in motion. And can you sort of expand on where we're at with that, or how that gets decided, or?
When we do conceptual layouts of these projects, we just try to look at energy output and what's going to be most effective at each site we develop. So right now that we're looking at a fixed tilt system because we believe it would be most effective and suitable for the Effort Solar site. Now, when we actually get into final design and we understand construction start dates, procurement timelines, and things like that, we can better evaluate what the best opportunity is for the project. As it stands now, we believe this will be more of a fixed tilt system.
So can you explain fixed tilt versus tracking?
Yeah, fixed is what it sounds like. It's going to stay in one position, mounted permanently, and then the single axis tracker will actually rotate and follow the sun as it tracks across the sky.
From the last hearing, I was a bit confused at the end there, and I believe it's still your domain. If we go by what we know right this second, the Chestnut Hill portion of this will not be going forward. As I see the plans, the substation was in the Chestnut Hill section. So I believe that you could answer, where then does the substation go?
We would, again, look at the final design phase of this project. And we're actually evaluating how it's going to look, what panels and racking systems will be implemented at this site. The substation will be evaluated too for feasibility. So there is a chance, like you're talking about, that it could be on the other side of the transmission line from where it is now. It would be, a few hundred feet maybe. But that would come in the final design when we understand and know the equipment we're going to be using, the racking system, the panels, and the interconnection results.
I don't know if you can answer this part of it. A lot of things, again, most of us are new to this process, so excuse me if this is, but a lot of what you're saying so far tonight is it will be included in the design phase. And I guess I'm personally a little bit confused about this conditional use, acceptance or denial, is then going to be approved or denied based on information we don't know yet. So guess I'm just a little bit like, before the conditional use is approved or denied, do some of those details become more clear for the supervisors to then approve or deny based on that information? Or does it only go after approval to the planning commission?
So, do you mind if I answer? Sure. So, Nate Fox, the attorney for the applicant Effort Solar. So, what these last 3 hearings have been, and tonight's hearing is, there's a section in the zoning ordinance at 400-847 that provides a set of specific standards for a solar power generation of a commercial nature, such as this one. So this lays out the requirements for the use, and some of these have to be shown now, and some have to be verified or complied with after construction or at a later point in the application. So, for instance, things like getting appropriate insurance for the facility. We can't get insurance now because there is no facility. Certain interconnection requirements or permits or licenses from public utilities or any of the federal agencies that have jurisdiction, we can't do that or even apply for those until there's a use. In addition to things like that, the ordinance also has environmental protection standards, which is why an environmental impact study, and Mr. Zerkis testified during 2 hearings regarding the extensive work and review that went into that. In addition to that, your township and most others in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania have a subdivision and land development ordinance, which then, based on the zoning ordinance, we have to recertify, prepare a detailed set of land development, preliminary and final land development plans, which at that point, your township professionals, your county planning commission, and your local planning commission will review. And all that based on in a basic sense, the zoning ordinance and the conditional use creates the box in which the rest of the design work has to comply. So while I do recognize, I do understand, I do see some, frustrated gestures and upsetness, and I know that we're not doing everything at this time, and some of the things we really couldn't do at this time. But this is the very starting place to see if there is even the permission to continue forward down the road to the next steps. Is that a fair explanation?
I understand your explanation.
You're asking for permission to do something, you're not even giving us straightforward answers of where you're gonna put it.
Respect, and I really don't want to argue respectfully. We are. The ordinance has very clear setbacks. 100 acre, all collectors, structures, equipment containers, and associated mechanical facilities. 100 feet from all property lines. We've shown compliance with that. Maximum lot coverage of 75%. We're below that.
That's a plan for Chestnut Hill, not for Polk.
Let's have no, this is a hearing, we can't have people shouting out and talking out of turn. Everybody's gonna get their turn, but we're gonna keep moving.
And thank you. And we'll happily continue to walk through and explain. But the zoning ordinance is the starting place. The zoning ordinance provides the standards for the use. Once those standards are complied with and if zoning approval is given, then the land development process can start. We can't go into land development, we can't go through land development, and there's case law that says the supervisors can't approve a land development before zoning is settled. This is only about the zoning and whether or not a conditional use, which is a use that's permitted provided the applicant meets all of the conditions. So we've presented an application that we would posit meets all of the requirements and conditions of the zoning ordinance, not yet the land development ordinance, we're not there yet, but all of the requirements of the zoning ordinance. And if and when that is approved by the Board of Supervisors, the land development process. So in effect, in some ways, we start all over subject to the requirements and any conditions that would be imposed on us by the conditional use decision. And Ms. Carey, that was your question. I tried to answer some of the others. Did And do you, anything else I can provide, or like Mr. Simmons to grab the mic for me and continue to talk to him?
I feel like maybe this is maybe taking another step, and you can say so if that. So what I'm understanding, and I do understand this is a conditional use zoning hearing, I get that. I guess in my head, I don't know how the supervisors approve a plan that's not concrete. And I don't know that you can answer it. I don't know if they can answer it. But it's, I guess, if we're zoning, and I get it, we're zoning for the potential, right? Because then there's the next phases. So we're saying, yes, you can use this property for this project.
Correct.
That's all we're doing right now, I get that. But I guess, I don't have the words.
Well, can I try, and please feel free to interrupt. So, going further in the process, there are other outside agencies that we have to comply with. For instance, County Conservation District for an NPDS permit, which also includes DEP and management of the stormwater on site. So during the land development process, there'll be a series of plans and calculations done which include design for stormwater management systems and basins. And what we may come to find is that the area of, and you may see some people to my right get upset, but the solar field may have to shrink because of the amount of stormwater management that would be required. And I'm just saying that by way of example. Or alternatively, what we couldn't do is there's 191 acres total on the Polk Township portion of this project. What we couldn't do is say, oh, there's another 50 acres, we're going to come in and add to that. So this is drawing, in a basic sense, it's drawing a box around the property and saying, we're complying with the requirements of the ordinance, we're providing all of the information that's required, we're demonstrating things that we're meeting the height requirements, the buffer system, we will get the licenses that we can't yet apply for, but we will do that. If we don't do that, and we can't do that, then we're dead. Provide the required access, and some of these things like communication interference, placement of the panels. You heard testimony tonight about how those will be complied with, but some of these things require re-verification, and the ordinance provides for re-verification, and you'll hear from Mr. Cadelhan tonight regarding a glare study, and there's requirements that the panels have to be oriented in such a way to minimize glare, not create a problem for adjacent property owners. And then after installation, before use and occupancy, the township can come out and verify that, and we have to mitigate against that. So I hope I'm answering your question, and hope I'm answering some of the other residents' questions, because it's been a repeated question. Well, why isn't everything designed? In short, we're designing everything we can, but if there are any changes, they have to be reevaluated, make sure they comply with the zoning, and comply with anything else along that process. This is a multi-step, multi-part, and multi-agency process. What did I miss, or tell me if that was not a direct answer to your question?
No, I appreciate the answer, and I'm with you on one part of it. I don't know how we approve the use of solar panels. I don't know how we look at a glare study when we don't know what panels are going to be there. So how does the supervisors approve or deny? Oh, I got it. Yeah, I got it. So they're just approving that, yes, you can go there. It doesn't matter which panels you use.
There's no...
Nate, can I just jump in here?
Go for it.
I don't want to get too much into this, but a conditional use here, and the operative word is conditional. there's some things in the zoning ordinance that are permitted. For instance, you're building a single-family residence, you go to the zoning officer, you get a permit, you can build your house. That is not a conditional use. A conditional use, there has to be these hearings, and all the laundry list of items in the conditional use ordinance pertaining to solar panels has to be complied with, and the supervisors are also have some latitude to put additional conditions in the decision. There will be a written decision in this case, and I'm not saying whether it's going to be granted or not because we haven't determined that. But if it is granted, as in past conditional use cases in this township and other townships I'm familiar with, the decision contains a laundry list of conditions they have to comply with when they submit the land development plan. So it's just not simply a matter of saying, yes, you can build it there. It's yes, you can build it there if they get approval, but there's going to be a list of conditions they have to comply with, and that's the purpose of having these hearings.
Thank you, yes, I think that I understand that. So when the hearing is done, you will amend whatever conditions you see fit. So just for flippancy, if the supervisor said, you may use this land for this solar project, but you may not use the solar panels that move, you must use fixed. That would be something that you then go back to them after.
The supervisors can, I'm not going to get into the specific conditions because the hearing isn't over, and the supervisors, we have not deliberated on this because the hearing is not over. We haven't heard all the testimony, not only their testimony, but your folks' testimony as well. But as I say, we can impose conditions on the development that the applicant would have to comply with. If they're unhappy with the conditions, they can file a court appeal. And at the end of this hearing, I am going to allow the applicant, as well as anybody here that's a participant, to submit to us what you think we should do. If you think we should grant it, what conditions. If you think we should deny it, on what basis we would deny it. That we will consider all those things before we make a final decision in the case. So, do you have any other questions of the witness? Ms. Carey.
Just a information question on the recent handout. It says participating household, non-participating household. What am I participating in?
So participating would mean a landowner that has leased his property or sold his property to the solar project.
It's not the landowners around, it's the actual, got it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Stuart Hochberg.
How are you going to be helping the landowner to live across the street?
You can't hear me, I can't hear you.
I can hear you. Quite well. How are you going to help the landowners who live across the street from this project if there's a fire? What's going to happen?
So those kind of situations are what we address with the emergency response plan. We make sure that the fire department is well equipped and comfortable with the emergency response plan when we design the final design of the site.
So you don't, at this point, and also you still are 3 hours, right? Nothing has been changed from that. You were just talking about it, but nothing has changed.
What was that? Can't hear you.
You are still at 3 hours response time. That really hasn't changed because you didn't say it was changed to 2 hours. It was changed. You're just going to work on that. So it's still 3 hours.
Yes, we will work with the fire department to minimize that.
And what will happen if it is found that these panels interfere with people's cell phones and cables, et cetera, internet? What will you do?
I mean, if there's any adverse effects from our project to neighboring landowners, we will have to deal with that on a case-by-case basis.
Well, what if it happens in the entire area? Everybody has issues. What will you do?
I have not heard of that happening on a solar facility yet. So, but again, if there's any adverse effects from our project, we will
Thank you.
handle that as needed.
Mark and/or Sarah Martini.
All right. I know it's the conditional usage hearing but if it gets approved, do you guys start any ground removal or stripping of ground or tree removal or setting up for the construction site before you go to the land development? Or is it just you get the approval and then you start digging and moving stuff right away?
No, we can't do anything until the land development plan's approved.
I mean, I agree with Jen, but it's kind of hard to fathom or to get the big picture when it's just dribs and drabs of what's gonna be. I mean, I understand the will comply that you don't know this because you don't know that. Well, I also understand that solar itself is still in like a new phase. I mean, an efficient solar is what, 25% ballpark? That's efficient. If I worked like that at my job, they'd fire me. and then I like decline 1 to 2% every year, they fire me. I don't know. It doesn't make no sense.
Good evening. I don't see in the fire plan how, you said you're going to turn off the electricity immediately. Is it possible that those panels will still be producing electricity if it's a sunny day or if the firefighters have staging lights on them?
Yeah, so as long as panels are actually getting sunlight, they are technically producing electricity. Where you can actually de-energize the system is before it gets to like the junction box or the inverter at the end of like the row of panels.
So is there a risk of electrocution over firefighters?
I do not believe so. I'm not an engineer and I have not heard of a risk of electrocution from the panels themselves.
The NSDS sheets that you're speaking of, do you monitor those if you leave out the panels or if you have changed in part of what you want to use? Are you required to continuously update your township on those?
We can commit to letting the township know what equipment we're using.
If you're using pixels or articulating and you have a lot of dust and no rain for a long time, how do you clean the panels?
For projects up here in like Pennsylvania and even in the Midwest, annual rainfall and windy conditions are generally enough to keep the panels clean. If they get dirty enough or they get coated enough to where they are clean, we would likely have to truck in water. It'd be clean, potable water that's,
I'm sorry, wouldn't that be a risk of electrocution if you're putting water on a solar field?
No, I believe a lot of projects in the Southwest and even in Texas, they use sprayers to clean the panels quite often.
So a pressurized sprayer or?
It'd be more of a, not like pressure washer, high pressure.
What about a cleaner or anything like that?
No chemicals would be used.
So what if they're covered with pollen, saying there's an expected rain or?
Correct.
And again, you'd be trucking in water from there.
We still have to understand that.
I have a bit of a question on some other things. I'm not sure if they would be related, but I'll go back to that. In the transcript of the first hearing, Mr. Harrison had told us that there had been a fire that you had experienced in the location. Or that's how you would turn off all of the electricity and allow it to burn out.
I'm sorry, I'm not following the question. Could you repeat that again?
In the transcript, on page 52, line 1, you were discussing a previous fire that had at another facility where you turned off all of the power and allowed it to burn out by itself. But before, someone else said that there has never been a fire on your facility.
I was talking about the project in general, not our project. So
Okay, in the transcript, it said he had experienced that.
if there, yeah, I think there was a miscommunication.
Okay. On page 71 of the previous transcript, you discussed the saldo and how it would be reported against the property. I'm confused on that, how the landowner would own the property and this would only be a lease. So who would you report that against?
We Are you talking like where is the agreement recorded?
Right, this is, it was, and I believe.
So under the municipality's planning code, an equitable owner of property or a lessee, if given contractual rights, has the right to make application, such as the case here. So the plans and development agreements, operation and maintenance agreement for stormwater, they get recorded against the property. So just the tax parcels that are at issue as part of the application would have the plans recorded, and that would be the same if you subdivided property at your home or other commercial property owner would come in for a land development plan or building modification that required a land development plan recording.
Recorded against the property owner themselves, but he would have to have good faith that the company or the lessee would complete.
Sure, I think I understand, and that's why they're required to be recorded against the property owner, so that if any of us aren't here, if the property changes hands, that there's a record in the county recorder's office to make sure that all of the requirements, if we get that far of approval, are in place and found. So the plan has notes, and tell me to stop if the plan has some notes on it that will bind in perpetuity the property.
Who would be responsible then if there was a failure to complete the requirement?
So depending upon what the requirement is, the subdivision land development ordinance and land development agreements give the right, and my client has to post security, that if, say, I don't think the township is interested in coming in and putting in the solar racking or things like that, but if construction had started and then ceased, we have to put up sufficient money to make sure that any public improvements like stormwater management, erosion control, things like that, there's enough money there to go out and be contracted, to be done and completed to make sure that nothing is half done.
So that would be the decommissioning.
And separately, in addition to that, there's a decommissioning agreement, which would be recorded against property, and financial security has to be posted for that to make sure that no matter who's here, the decommissioning is done in accordance with the decommissioning requirements.
In the ordinance, I read that you have to have for recycling facility, you have to have a main recycling facility that you will be using.
Regarding the panels at the end,
Or not even at the end, what happens if there's
During-
a hailstorm or a hurricane and they're damaged? How long, A, before you replace them? And B, do you know where you're sending them for recycling?
Not yet, that would be determined later during final design.
I recently looked at the fire suppression plan that you brought today. It doesn't really talk about how you're going to put out the fire. Are you going to use foam? Are you using water?
I believe there is a statement towards the end of that plan that mentions you can use water from like 30 feet away in a fog pattern, and they use the combination. They can use foams or dry chemicals as well.
That plan is for your location in Canada. Is that what all the requirements in the US?
I believe fires are pretty similar here as they are in Canada, but again, we will establish a good emergency response plan with the fire department as part of our.
I looked online and it said that facility is closed. Is that why?
The facility in Canada is closed? No, I cannot speak to that.
It says in there that you'll keep the grass well trimmed to the ground to prevent fires, but in other hearings, we've been told it's going to be a native meadow grass for pollinators. So if we're mowing it down, how are the pollinators working?
We keep the grass mowed on site, and we make sure that it'll never get above a certain height, like to reach the bottom of the panels or anything like that. We want to keep it aesthetically pleasing, and yet there will be certain areas too along in the facility that would have pollinators, like the flowers and stuff like that.
And how does the snow come off the panels? If you don't have sunny day, and now they're not articulating, they're all going to, there's no heat really generated.
Even on non-sunny days, even on cloudy days, the panels themselves will still be collecting some, level of photons and generating a little bit of heat. Usually that's enough to keep the snow and ice from sliding off, and it's probably more of an engineering question I could pass off to him. But generally it'll slide off and not freeze fast enough. If there is an event where it's sticking or something like that, we would have to come in remove it slowly from the project.
How would you do that?
They have different devices. There's a company called like Snoller, and they use different Snoller. They have different things they use now for panels for actually taking snow and ice off their panels in really extreme weather conditions.
I've noticed on my neighbors who have solar panels that they really do snow a lot. Last couple weeks we've seen that last. And having the backing of a roof behind it of a heated house, I'm kind of surprised that it's not sliding off quickly. The alert system that you plan on using, is that satellite-based, internet-based?
I'm actually not sure. We'll have to address that in full detail later.
And last time we were here, you said that there's absolutely no way that there could be any island effect on solar panels?
Correct. Well, once you get to the perimeter of the facility, it does not change the ambient temperature of an area. Now,
That's usually ambient temperature inside the facility?
I mean, again, I think I passed this off to our engineers, but if you hold your hand above the solar panel on a really sunny day, then yes, you can feel the heat, but it dissipates very quickly as you move away from the panels.
And you have studies.
Yes,
Would you be able to provide those?
I believe so.
Thank you.
Michael McMurphy?
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I apologize if some of these questions aren't under your purview. As development manager on a space that seemed to be questions you could answer, but if not, that's fine. Understanding that the design has not been finalized, in previous testimony, they've indicated that the height of the mast would be between 6 and 20 feet. Is that still with the change from a rotating tilting design? Is that still anticipated to be accurate for what will be in place?
We anticipate a max height of 12 to 15 feet.
Yeah, and again, understanding that the design hasn't been finalized, is there an estimate on the size of the panels that will be mounted on these masts?
Across the board, most monocrystalline panels are usually 3 foot by 6 foot or 4 foot by 8 foot per panel.
And you've indicated that these won't change in tilt, but they will change in rotation. Can you give an idea of the range of rotation in terms of compass points or degrees?
No, when we say fixed tilt, they will not be rotating at all.
It will not be rotating at all. It's not going to follow the sun. as it
Correct.
moves.
If
So
we use the
they're
single
gonna be-
axis tracker, then it would rotate. And no, I don't know the degree, but we are planning to use fixed for the site.
They are going to be completely fixed. They're not going to rotate or tilt.
Correct.
Can you speak on the construction period of the project?
It usually takes about 12 months, weather permitting.
Typically, in a project like this, which seems to be in many different areas, somewhat spread out, is it done in phases? Is it all done at once? How does that period of construction generally work?
Usually you're going to start, it's a short answer, it's usually all done at once. The roads will get put in first, and then the grading of the roads, you put the aggregate down for vehicles to travel, then the racking would go in, and then the panels get mounted. Usually what happens first is they start working on the actual sub that taps into the transmission line.
You mentioned the construction and grading of the roads. Is that something that gets undone once the construction of the fields are done and just the roads that are needed for maintenance remain, or is whatever is done to facilitate construction, does that remain throughout the life of the project?
Usually the roads will be decommissioned along with the rest of the site unless the landowner specifically asks for us to leave.
But during the period of operation of the field, those roads are essentially going to be in place for the entire operation
Yes.
of the panel. In the environmental impact study, there is a condition that construction could only occur during essentially the fall and winter times because of certain species. Around here we get a little bit of precipitation, which will soften up the ground. That needs to be done. Are there plans or are there typically reinforcements of roads done that would then have an impact on the impervious surface that has to be considered in the runoff and stormwater considerations?
Sure, that would have to be considered when we develop our construction plan.
Can you give a brief description of the types of equipment that are used during the construction, excavators, bulldozers, how the masts are put in place, et cetera? What types of equipment are we looking at, and the typical, what the typical number of pieces of equipment during, a typical day or week of construction might be going through our areas to construct this thing?
I mean, it'd be small skid steers, possibly even smaller bulldozers to, for the roads. Other than that, they use a ram to put in the racking system, and then panels are trucked in and they're carried out individually and placed on the racking.
And these are by box truck, by semi trucks coming in? What size vehicles are we looking at?
The panels are usually delivered by semi trucks.
By semi. I'm sure you said it'd be about a year for a project of this size for construction?
Yes, sir.
That's all my questions right now.
Douglas Swink.
You'll be able to hear me. I guess the question I gotta ask you before you ask my questions. How much experience do you have doing solar systems? Years?
I believe about 6 years now.
How many years with Samsung?
I believe a little over 3.
Do you have any engineering, mechanical, electrical, structural, any engineering at all?
No, we hire engineers.
Okay, so your only experience is the 6 years that you've been installing solar panels?
Correct.
Okay. So you hold no licenses as a project manager in any states?
No.
How many systems, and I might have missed this in the last meeting, I had to leave. How many systems has Samsung installed in the United States? Let him answer.
About a total of 90 megawatts.
How many locations have you installed in the United States, was the question. In the United States. You can give me a rough number between 5 and 10, 1 and 2, 7 and 9.
Around 5 projects.
Okay. How many of them have you installed?
Around 5.
How many of them have you been involved in?
I was not here when that happened.
The plant that you referenced, will you agree with me, the plant that you referenced in your fire study, that's Kingston, Canada?
Yes.
Compared to the size of this plant, bigger, smaller, 1/3 the size? Or less than 1/3 the size?
It's slightly bigger.
It's slightly bigger.
Yeah.
Is that a full-time fire department or a volunteer fire department?
I'm not sure. I'd have to get clarification.
Well, you have a fire plant here for that department, and you're the guy that's in charge. That's why I'm asking you.
Yeah, so we provided this as an example that my company has used in the past. So I asked another manager, a colleague of mine that had worked on that project years ago. This was an example emergency response plan we wanted to provide to the township and the fire department, and we will be developing our own for this project.
When you say your company, Samsung, or you have your own company?
Samsung.
Okay. I can virtually assure you that the fire department in Canada is full-time. Are you aware that this fire department only volunteers?
Yes.
Okay. Again, you might not be able to answer this. Would you agree with me, based on your experience, that a solar panel is always on unless it's been damaged or destroyed? It's always generating power.
When there's sunlight hitting the panel.
So when they're cardboard box, you're telling me they don't generate any electricity at all inside of a cardboard box?
Not that I know of, no.
You're talking to a 50-year commercial electrician. You want to make sure you're saying they generate no power in a
I
box.
should verify that.
You also stated, and again, I'm just asking, I know you probably can't answer some of these, okay? At the first hearing, the Samsung guy said they had a panel already picked out, and that's now changed. They're not using that panel. The Samsung rep at that first hearing said, you can't put a solar panel fire out, you gotta let them burn out, was his exact word. Right. Because all the while they're burning, they are generating power. Okay, and I'm sure it's in one of the transcripts. I don't have a copy of the transcript. Would you also agree with me that his glare report that he's gonna submit is gonna change based on a fixed versus a rotating system?
I will let him answer that in a moment.
Well, you're the project manager, I would think you know that.
So we will be using similar panels, right, from what we've modeled. So they will be very consistent with the glare study that we've already done.
That didn't answer my question. My question was, based on a rotating solar panel and a fixed panel, the glare report, once you agree, is gonna be different? I'm asking the project manager, if I could, please. That's the man who's testifying. If you don't know, he can just say you don't
Yes,
know.
it
I
could
understand
be.
that.
Yes, it could be.
Like, I'm not an engineer, okay? I'm just asking, if he's the project manager. With 6
Yes.
years' experience, I would think he'd know that answer.
Yes, it could be different.
Okay. And you stated, I believe, sooner, it's hard to go behind Sarah, because she always has good questions. You've never seen a solar panel catch on fire?
No,
Never?
I haven't, no.
Okay. Do you know if Samsung, based on sitting here tonight, has ever had a solar panel fire anywhere in their locations, anywhere in the world?
No,
No, they haven't, or no, you don't know?
I believe they haven't.
Okay. That's your testimony, they haven't?
Yes.
Okay. How many projects in the 6 years that you've been with Samsung have you worked on?
Oh, quite a few. They're all in, I'd
10?
say 20 to 30.
Okay, most of them are in Canada?
No, we have a lot of projects in similar positions like Effort Solar that are in a development process right now, trying to.
Okay, but
get
actual
the
construction,
permitting.
how many of you have been involved in actual construction?
None have started construction yet.
Okay. Listen, everybody's gonna learn, I don't have a problem with that. You also stated a little bit ago that, and I didn't mean that as a nasty comment, just so you know, everyone's gonna learn.
Yes, sir.
I spent 3 years in trade school, 4 years apprenticeship, I understand, okay? But I'm still stupid, so I understand completely. You stated when you stand by the panel, there is no raise in temperature. You wanna stand by that answer? You
Yeah,
said
I
once
mean,
you put your hand over them, you don't feel any temperature rise. You don't feel a temperature difference 10 feet away?
That's what I was trying to say earlier. Immediately, like right next to a panel on a really hot sunny day, then yes, you can feel the heat, but it dissipates quickly as you move away.
10 foot away, can you still feel the temperature?
It dissipates quickly as you move away.
10 foot away, can you still feel the rise in temperature?
Again, I'd have to provide the heat island effect studies, and we can do that.
Have you ever been in a solar field
Yes.
in the summertime and you haven't noticed 10 foot away it's still hot?
Nothing different than outside the facility.
Okay. The substation, there was testimony a while ago about the noise from a substation. Will you agree with me that a substation includes transformers?
Yes.
And transformers make noise?
Yes.
Transformers have fans?
Yes.
Fans make noise?
Yes.
Thank you. Inverters have, I'm believing your inverters will have fans in them. Other people think they're gonna be water cooled, there's no such thing, right, I understand that. But they're gonna have fans in them,
Yes.
and normally the inverters are at the end of the rows, correct?
Yes.
And they do make noise.
Yes.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On your,
No, I have nothing to say.
okay. Valerie Wernette? Valerie Wernette? No response. Josh Barrett? Josh Barrett? No response. Christy Goff?
I'm here, I got nothing.
Thank you. Joanna Valentine?
Yes, here. Right now, how many functioning sites do you guys have?
Right now, we have nothing operating in this region.
I know, and bear with me, we talked about in previous hearings the acreage size, and I know Chestnut Hill is was part of this plan, and I don't know where they stand on it, or I'm told that they're not part of it. So with just Polk Township, have you guys, has the acreage, have you modified things? And I guess the acreage that's in our township, what that number is?
I believe it's around 220 acres.
Because I remember it being 205 at the last meeting, but I didn't know if that was still including the Chestnut Hill portion.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
It was, I think it was 205 total acres at the last meeting, but I didn't know if that included Chestnut Hill Township.
That is not including Chestnut Hill.
So now the new plans that I know that this is just the conditional portion and you'll present development plans. The study on noise and transformers and what is it, inverters and all that, for clarity, which I know all of them now have fans and they do make noise. Is that gonna be represented? Because before it was in the initial documentation you gave us, it was in a different location.
I could let the engineers probably address that a little bit more effectively, but based on the layouts we already used, nothing would really change based on like where the panels would actually be placed in the inverter stations compared to those panels. So the noise study would be still effective for Polk Township.
And at the last hearing, we talked about the environmental study, and I just, the bat was the one species that was indicated to be what needed to be considered for changing that property, that land. So someone said that they were checking, and I thought it might have been a member, a township member, I didn't know if it was one of your panel or a township member, about the bear and the eagle and the other animals. Have you done any further information on that?
Let the environmental guy.
Do you mind if we have the gentleman who worked on the environmental impact?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Say you're
Sorry.
Max, and you're still sworn in. Do you mind reintroducing yourself?
My name is Max Ozerkis with Killinghorn, professional wetland scientist. The bats, the hits that we got from the Threatened and Endangered Species agencies included bats, and we agreed to avoidance measures, which was clearing trees during a seasonal restriction, is I believe where we landed with that. Bears, we did not consider any impacts to. They're not a regulated species. Eagles, we did not receive any hits from wildlife agencies regarding eagles, so I do not believe there will be any impacts to eagles as a result of the project.
So I'm part of the community that borders a project where we have a lake that's spring fed, and we talk about water retention ponds. Like we know that part of our lake and watershed comes from that direction. And so I don't even know, is there any way for you to provide information about how it's going to affect our lake, our springs, by you affecting water absorption?
And sure, do you mind if we have Tom Cadlehan, our professional engineer, who will do the stormwater design and can walk through that process and what's evaluated?
Yeah, definitely. Tom Cadlehan, civil engineer for Kinley-Horn and Associates, and a professional engineer in Pennsylvania. So with these projects, you know, our main goal and what we have to comply with are the Act 167 regulations through the municipality, as well as the Chapter 102 regulations through the County Conservation District and the state or the state DEP. So pretty much what that means is any type of improvements that we make on site, our post-development stormwater conditions must match or be better than the pre-development conditions. It's also mostly based off of surface runoff. So all of the runoff that we're containing, we're recharging back into the ground at the same rate or a better rate than what is currently out in the field today. So with the retention ponds and the rate of runoff that comes out of those ponds, it will be matching or providing a better effect than what is out on the site today.
So is there you're directing them, or is it just the pond is going to be collecting and it's absorbing into the earth?
So it'll be kind of both. So for smaller storms, the pond, if it's an infiltration pond, if its main purpose is to recharge water into the ground, it will be doing so. For larger storms where there's a lot of runoff going into the pond, there will be other outlet structures that safely mitigate the water through a culvert that will be directed somewhere. However, we are going to be making sure that the drainage patterns that are out there today will not be changed. So any of the runoff that goes into the pond is still going to end up in the same spot that it would have if the pond wasn't there.
Terry Lidgell. Alan German.
Yes, I have a few questions. How long has Effort Solar been around? How long has Effort Solar been in business? How long has Effort Solar been in business?
We created Effort Solar, I want to say in 2021?
So
2020.
So it's new.
Yes.
That would take all the liability if something happened. Samsung wouldn't have any liability in this project.
I mean, so I think you're asking for a legal conclusion, and I don't know that anyone here is.
Well, if Effort Solar did Chapter 13 or 11, I think it's pretty important to know. I mean, Samsung doesn't want to be involved with this project.
That's why the bond would be placed up front to decommission the facility.
Well, I understand that, but it's very easy. I mean, it doesn't seem right that Samsung itself is not involved. You have a shell company that, God forbid, something goes wrong, Everett Solar can't be touched. Samsung can't be touched. That's a lot of liability.
So, I don't want to argue with you, but that's common practice is that almost any real estate developer or property owner will set up a property-specific entity, and it's not something that's prohibited. But I understand you just want to speculate and say that this is going to be left on. I think you're getting to could be left on an island. Who's going to be here to clean it up? But to Mr. Simmons' point, that's why we have to post the financial security for both the construction, the decommissioning, and also maintain policies of insurance as set forth in the ordinance, in amounts set forth in the ordinance.
So you're not sure about this project, in a sense?
I disagree with that.
I think he's answered the question, Mr. German.
Okay. Also, you were talking about the fire situation, and you're talking about water and everything. I was told water would not put out these panels.
I mean, again, the common fires I think that happen in these facilities are going to be brush fires on the grass underneath the panels themselves. So when we talk about water, we talk about controlling the fires that are happening across like the pasture land and things like that. Again, we will be developing an emergency response plan with the local fire department so they are comfortable to respond to any emergency situation.
And like it was mentioned before about the substations, yet you don't know where they're going to be located at this point?
It'd be along the transmission line. I mean, when we do the final design, we were gonna look at what's most feasible. When we design the project, what makes the most sense on where it's located.
Where are those transmission lines? Are they located in Polk Township?
Believe it's almost right on the township line.
But there's
It's
not
real
enough.
close.
My understanding was that they were really located in Chestnut Hill.
So we would still have access to the transmission line from the Polk Township side, if that answers your question.
I guess so. That's it. Thank you.
Frank Bruns?
What side of the township line are we talking about?
For the substation, again, that would come during the final design when we fully assess the site and where everything needs to go. We can't expand the boundary of the site from what we've shared, but the final design will show where the substation is.
Have you tried this project in one of the other states that's getting the benefit of this project? Except Pennsylvania. We're like flyover country when you look at it. First they come for our water, then they want to sell us Synagro agricultural fertilizer. Then they're coming with another project. We're kind of in a very desirable place. And I think we are the conservators of this beautiful country. Have you tried this in any of the other states?
Well, we develop these projects all over the country.
How about our neighboring states where this is going to go, close to us? Have you tried it elsewhere?
We're actively trying to develop all over the PJM territory.
Well, I guess that
PJM.
What territory?
PJM.
What is PJM?
What is that?
PJM stands for Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Maryland. They are the regional transmission organization that manages the grid for about 13 mid-Atlantic states. Pennsylvania would be included in that. Everybody's heard of ERCOT. They were all over the news in Texas years ago. That is a regional transmission organization that governs Texas and parts of some surrounding states. So PJM governs the state of Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, and 13 mid-Atlantic states up here.
And PJM is who you do an interconnection study with and who effectively controls whether and how you can connect to the public utility grid, correct?
Correct.
Anything else? Lorelei Fox? Tom Manzo? Annette Vasquez?
Here. So, Effort LLC is basically owned or part of Samsung, which has their offices in Oceanside, California, and this is a South Korean company, right?
Samsung has offices in New Jersey, Chicago, California, Houston.
Do they use the Rural Energy for America program? I mean, are you guys receiving money from the federal government or the state government to do your project?
No.
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 So all the money comes from?
Private equity.
Okay.
Private equity.
Okay. Now, I was seeing that there is going to be a fence around the solar panel fields. How tall is this fence going to be?
Usually the perimeter fences are about 7 feet tall.
7 feet tall, okay. And the substation, I know that you guys like to get your solar fields near the high energy lines.
Yes.
That if you see and you go through Long Mountain Road up, you can see those high lines, you know, the
Transmission lines.
yeah,
Yes.
so that's why you picked up that place?
Yes.
Okay, so did you go and get the owners and ask them for leasing their lands, or did the owners went to you to ask to offer a lease for these lands?
We contacted the owners first.
Okay, so you go around contacting any owners that you see that are near those lines because it's convenient for you to put a substation there that you could put your energy going into those lines?
Yes.
Those substations, do you need to put water in them? Do you need to dig down and get some water?
No.
Well, I don't know, because what I have read online, a lot of these substations use table water. The water of
The substation will not be water cooled.
okay. There is a part of your land that you want to build on that is forested, right?
Correct.
How many acres do you have there?
They're actually wooded.
Uh-huh.
I don't have the figure in front of me. I think it's between 50 and 100 acres.
Okay.
Polk Township.
So if the bats are endangered and bats live on trees and things like that, you're basically going to cut everything off. So where are those bats going to go? Have you had anybody gone there at night and see? And don't tell me you're gonna walk like 5 minutes around the periphery and then say, oh, I looked at everything.
Ma'am, we're happy to answer questions, but one of the supervisors asked if we could keep some level here. Max, do you mind responding as to what the mitigation measures again are for bats? And I'm sorry, this is giving some feedback.
The bats have been in significant decline for several years now, and
And you think this is not gonna help?
Let's let him answer the question, please.
there is a significant amount more suitable habitat than there is actual occupied habitat. So the project site has not been determined to be occupied habitat. It is simply suitable habitat. And it is specifically suitable summer habitat for the bats. So tree clearing would be conducted in the winter time when bats that may or may not be there would in any case not be using that habitat.
So what happens in the summer when they come back to use that place?
There's other suitable, like I mentioned, there is much more suitable habitat than actual occupied habitat. There is more suitable habitat than is needed for bats, but by clearing trees in the wintertime, there will be no impacts to bats that may be using that habitat. That is direct impact to bats.
Okay. It is my understanding that the Pohopoco Creek starts somewhere around there, and it goes all the way down, and as you know, where does the Pohopoco Creek ends?
Beltsville.
In Beltsville, right?
I'm not sure exactly where it ends.
Okay, do you know that that has exceptional value? Do you know that the Aquashicola Creek has been just branded as exceptional value? Do you know that if any of that water runoff that you're trying to contain, if it gets into the Pohopoco Creek, it's gonna wind up in Beltsville?
You have to ask a question, and please.
Will that affect?
I have to object, this is the second time we're asking the exact same questions, interposing the same testimony. We're happy to answer questions, even repetitive questions, but this is exactly the same.
I am asking the question, excuse me, sir, I had not finished talking. I was asking the question because I am a physician, and I have patients that go into Beltsville Lake, and if your things that you're gonna do, and he's the one, do something to that creek, you will be affecting the health of children and adults that go to Beltsville. Do you agree with that?
Doctor, this is a time to ask questions, not to make statements.
I ask a question.
We are aware of the high-quality designation of Pohopoco Creek, and we will comply with all applicable stormwater rules and requirements.
Okay. Is your only endangered species are the bats?
Correct.
You've never thought about the spot turtles? Those are protected by the federal government.
The threatened and endangered species screening that we conducted included 3 state agencies and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service at the federal level. It came back with only bats, and we are complying with the requirements for bats. There were no other potential threatened and endangered species identified on site.
So you didn't see any bog turtles anywhere? I know because I live near the Pohopoco Creek and I've seen them there.
We did not see any bog turtles, no.
And they are usually here in northeast Pennsylvania, in the area of your program. Just that you know, you might want to look a little bit more into that. Thank you.
Again, respectfully, this is a time for questions for the witnesses. You'll have time to present a case and evidence and make any statement you wish.
Do you have any more questions, Doctor?
No.
Chief Tippett, you here? Alfred Haywood? Alfred Haywood? Robert Caffrey? Robert Caffrey? Gary Stroll?
Yeah. You said you had a study done with all the federal and state government. How long did that study take and who did you all have?
Are you referencing threatened and endangered species?
Yes.
It was a screening conducted through the Pennsylvania Natural Diversity Inventory website, which is basically an online portal that checks background mapping and sends something to these agencies, and you receive a response with species that may be present on your site. It could direct you to perform additional screenings, do a specific on-site survey or things like that, or just avoidance conservation measures like we discussed for bats. So bats was the only thing that we were required to address.
You didn't check on spotted salamander or the leopard tree dog?
No.
Or in the area?
They, according to these agencies, have not been documented in the area or not on site, and so.
Was it checked? Were they checked to be on site? The land actually looked at?
No, we weren't required to because the agencies did not instruct us to.
That's one other project I worked for Silver and we all had to have it checked by actual environmental protection agencies to get a land study to make sure those items weren't there.
Understood, but these screenings take into account all species that are listed as threatened or endangered by the state or the federal government. So if they had a record or even a potential for those species to occur on site, the screening would have identified that and directed us to do additional studies. Because they were not identified, those agencies are in essence telling us that there will be no impacts to those species.
So only the bats are the only thing available that could be there.
Correct.
Thank you.
Catherine Folio? Catherine Folio? Deb Modica?
I'm here. I don't think you'll have a problem hearing me. So the first question I have, what studies do you have on restoring farmlands back to how the land was before when a project is dismantled and you take the fields to wherever they go, their graveyard?
So usually our consultants will have to do modeling to see what's actually been put into the ground, what's taken out, what practices need to happen to restore the land to its original condition.
So what modeling do you have?
I don't know the specific naming convention for things like that, but we do hire, engineering groups to.
Can we have that modeling by the next hearing?
see it.
If there's an ordinance requirement, we will meet the ordinance requirement. The requirements for decommissioning set forth disturbed earth being graded, reseeded, unless the landowner requests in writing the access roads or the land not be restored. I think if there's something specific you're asking, I don't know that that's an ordinance requirement, so I don't know that there's an answer to the question you're asking.
Would you think that that would be a great concern to all the citizens in this room, that a prime farm, should you get approved to put these panels in, and then if you get decommissioned, all of a sudden, we don't want to do renewable energy anymore, we want to go back to coal, we want to go back to diesel fuel, that a farm once again becomes a farm to produce food for the American citizens? Do you think that should be a concern of ours?
So we have shown that giving the ground a break, for the 40 years that the project is operating, with natural vegetation planted on top, native grasses, that the ground actually recovers. It's not being cultivated, there's no leaching of nutrients, and the soil itself actually gets to rebound to higher levels than it was previously.
So you're saying that you'll put it back to its complete natural topography?
Yes.
That the land will look exactly like it did when you started from day one?
Yes.
So you're not going to be taking out any ravines, adding into any ravines, taking down any slopes?
No, we don't do any kind of significant grading.
Did PGM already file to purchase this electricity?
No.
Not done yet. Are you aware that, and I apologize that I have no internet, so I can't get the name of the town. There was recently, and that's why I really wish the fire chief was here tonight, a meeting in Georgia at a local community township hall hearing, and they had a training for the fire department. And one of the main things that they came up with, and this was the fire department that did the research, if somebody hits one of your panels, if a semi-truck goes in there, hits a panel, or if my friend Janet or Sarah hits a panel with their car, can I go save my friend, pull her out of that car without being electrocuted?
Again, that's going to have to be visited when we work with the local fire department and see what response procedures would be.
Okay, so Georgia did a study.
I'd have to look into the specific study.
Yeah, and well, what the study is that the AC gets powered off, but the DC does not.
Right.
And if you still have moonlight, it's still generating. So what do we do with the person that's trapped in that car?
We will have to come up with an effective response for our first responders.
Thank you. I have more. Are you aware of Adelaide Hadasu, that person with Harvard Business Review?
No.
So Adelaide says that the panels everywhere, economic incentives are rapidly aligning to encourage customers to trade in and exchange panels for newer, cheaper, more efficient models in the industry where circulatory situations such as recycling remain woefully inadequate. The sheer volume of the discarded panels will soon pose a risk to exponentially damaging proportions. What is your plan for that? Do you plan on, have you done any projects where you've already upgraded to other panels?
No project where panels have actually been changed out.
And again, you're still not sure where you will put these recycled panels?
Not yet.
Are you aware of IRENA, the organization IRENA?
No, ma'am.
The International Renewable Energy Official Projects asserts that large amounts of annual waste are anticipated by the early 2030s and could total 78 million tons by the year 2050. You're not aware of IRENA?
No, I've not done any work directly with IRENA or discussed them. So utility scale solar, where it stands right now, even on a global scale, is relatively new. And the recycling process to isolate the raw materials is quite expensive. So companies are putting together their business models right now. As we speak, there are several solar companies that are working on the recycling process because you have to put up, unique facilities and stuff like that to actually recycle them. So it's a new industry, and the recycling process is taking off as well.
And could I just ask the Harvard Business Review cited, yeah, if you don't mind, and is that a are those consumer panels?
No,
Okay, no, yeah,
Absolutely not.
send us a copy.
I will. You have my cell number, just text me an email where I could send it. And that would be my other question to you, Attorney Fox. Last hearing, I requested the address for the one in California. I still have not received that. I just want you to know, I am not 100% for or against solar. What I'm against is the destruction of farmland. Wind forestry. What I would like to know is why are you not projecting and looking more into putting these over parking lots? I would graciously love you 8 days next week if I didn't have to get soaking wet coming out of ShopRite with my groceries.
It's developing these projects at a utility scale. It's the first stepping stone in citing these projects is finding access to those transmission lines. And ground-mounted photovoltaic systems are the most efficient as it stands. I'm sorry, am I talking too fast? Utility scale development, the first stepping stone for projects like this to generate the output that the grid operators, PJM, wants, you have to find high voltage transmission lines. And accessing those transmission lines usually requires sophisticated substations and things like that. So when you talk about parking lot and rooftop solar, it's usually only on a distribution level, to where it's not really affecting the large load response that like the grid operators are requesting, for peak demand.
But we can't eat a solar panel. We need farms.
Yes, ma'am.
Did they put in the PGMQ for the entire 90?
Yes. Well, in two different queue positions, but the total is 90, yes.
So I have like 2 more questions. If I come to your house and I'm a stranger and I don't know you, and you're in the house with your wife and your 4 little kitties, and I'm coming in your house with an AK-47 and I'm telling you I'm taking all your food, and if you don't get it to me, I'm going to kill you, are you going to protect yourself and your family?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the wildlife, and this comes from somebody who's been in the business close to 40 years, and this is my sister. She's with land protection in Seattle, Washington, and she started here in the Delaware Water Gap in that area. So if a bear and its cubs, you destroy their habitat, and you said, and you testified, maybe not you, somebody testified, and that would be for Max, I guess, the animals will go to hop over to the next forest. So here again, that goes back to, if I come into your house with an AK-47 and steal your food and threaten your family, you're going to protect yourself. Somebody's probably going to die. So Max, these animals, what is going to be done to protect them? Because some of them, and this comes from somebody who's been in the business, not 6 years, not 5 years, not 10 years, close to 40. Who is going to protect those animals? What do you got in place to protect those animals? Because they will die. It's not just the bat we're worried about. Mr. Martini was attacked by a bear when he was a child. He was almost killed, mauled to death and eaten alive in front of his family. These are the things that we are concerned about. And then I have one more question. I guess I'm not going to get an answer to that one. So, maybe a lot of you don't realize I'm a real estate broker. I used to be a Coldwell banker. I was named in the top 12% in the United States of America. I'm a premier agent. I can call Coldwell banker and be hired anywhere in the world there's a Coldwell banker unless I have a criminal record, and I don't. This is the agreement of sale for the Pennsylvania Real Estate Commission. And we were talking before about seller's disclosure. One, as a licensed real estate broker, if Sarah calls me up and says, Deb, I live right on the border over here on this street, and I go to Sarah's house, and I say to Sarah, wait a minute, that's the projected solar farm factory that's going to be going up. Could be 300, 200, 500, we don't know yet, because that's where we're at this point. I'm going to tell Sarah, if you want me to be your listing agent, I'd be happy to list your house, but I'm not going to list your house unless it's put on the seller's disclosure. So, the real estate commission says on the agreement of sale.
Let her
The
speak.
question is-
Let her
There is a
speak.
question that goes with it.
Let her speak.
Seller knows of no other potential notices, including violations. Do you believe that you are a notice to the general public?
Ma'am, we're interposing a interpretation and respectfully, your belief and interpretation of what the Pennsylvania Real Estate Commission would obligate you to do as a listing broker.
It's not an interpretation, it's right here.
Well, I understand, but we're in a zoning proceeding. So, there are a host of other things that are required to be disclosed in that same form that are otherwise permitted uses on adjoining land. So what relevance that has, other than a general objection?
It has to do with property values that you guys have constantly testified has no impact on home property values if you put a solar farm in. Would you live there?
And we're not, we've presented a witness that actually had data and studies and performed data and studies and reviewed ample articles and analysis. And I know we didn't agree on that, but I think what you're presenting testimony, which is fine to do, but I'm not hearing a question that requires an answer in the last part regarding the real estate
Do you
disclosure.
believe a solar factory, a solar farm that you're proposing is a notice to the public if it's going to go in there? Did you make notice to anybody in this room?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
The question is, have you made notice to anybody in this room that you propose on putting this project in?
Wait, hold on. There's a question, did they actually give notice that it was surrounding properties? I think the answer is no.
I didn't get a notice.
She's right on Kresge Farm Road, she got no notice, and she's right across from where you're gonna put the pump station or substation, whatever the hell it is.
The cancer
You
station.
believe that
you're
you
not
should give
notified
notice?
This proceeding is obligated to proceed, or we're obligated to give the required notices in the zoning ordinance of the hearing and the public notice of the conditional use application. Those requirements of the township have been followed. I think you're asking an additional question that's not related to the conditional use hearing relative to a seller's disclosure. And no land is for sale. Like, this is not, we're not dealing with a real estate transaction. This is a zoning application.
But you're gonna lease the property.
And everybody else is.
That's what, respectfully, that's what gave us the standing to be here.
Right, but it's still, then you still have equity in the property as a leasing.
Under the municipality's planning code, a lease gives the standing as a landowner, as the term is defined in the definition section of the municipality's planning code.
So you testified earlier that you have the right to apply for to be here today for the permits or any studies because you're gonna be leasing the property.
But you're asking us questions relative to a hypothetical with a property owner who would ask you to list their property and whether or not that would have to be disclosed under the Pennsylvania Real Estate Seller's Disclosure Form, which I'm not sure the relevance of in a conditional use hearing.
And then there's one more. I'm gonna get an answer to that. So, Woodstock, New York, 2019, are you aware of the solar farm that was there that was voted down by the board?
No, ma'am.
And they won that case on wildlife habitats and property values. And I can give you that too. Thank you.
Susan, Rosie, Louis, Cardavona.
I'm here. No language. I want to be loud enough so everybody.
Okay.
I just want to be clear. Let me know clearly. You testified that you have not submitted a fire protection plan with the application at this point and do not plan to before the supervisors make a determination.
Correct.
Okay. Second question. Let me know clearly. You have not and do not plan to provide the supervisors a modification of the application of putting a substation on the Polk Township site before they make a ruling on this hearing.
I don't believe so.
Thank you. I wasn't going to bring up the bog turtles. Now, I heard at the last hearing, I thought box turtle, there's a difference between box turtles and bog turtles. The federal government and state of Pennsylvania both have rulings on land development applications if they impact this species of bog, B-O-G, turtle. The federal government has it listed as threatened, Pennsylvania has it listed as endangered. There are redevelopment plans to bring back habitat in Monroe County already. You mentioned the agencies. I know that this goes to the other gentleman here who did the environmental impact. I'm reading U.S. Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and the PA of Pennsylvania DEP. Can you refresh my memory? What agencies were you referring to before? You mentioned it tonight.
Yeah. As a federally listed species, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has jurisdiction over the bog turtle. There is likely a state agency that has jurisdiction as well, but they would defer to Fish and Wildlife Service for any sort of consultation or conservation measures.
That doesn't directly answer my question, so let me try to make my question clear. You stated tonight a certain agencies you consulted with when you did your environmental study and you came up with bats. What are those agencies?
Those agencies are U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Pennsylvania Game Commission, the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission, and the Department of Natural Resources, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources.
Okay, I'll be referring to that on the transcript later. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and Pennsylvania DEP, all three of them have jurisdiction. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers have an on-site technical assistance and general permit applications for 15 counties in Pennsylvania, including Monroe County, which I think is an obligation that you have to do before you submit your application. So I'm asking you, did you get the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and apply for it on-site technical assistance? Second part of that question is, if you did they come on-site and do their evaluation?
The Army Corps of Engineers regulates
It's a yes, no question.
We were not required to. Fish and Wildlife Service has jurisdiction over bog turtles. Army Corps of Engineers has jurisdiction over wetlands. There are no wetland impacts proposed as part of the project, and we received no hits for bog turtle as part of our threatened and endangered species screening.
I'll bring testimony in contradiction to that statement to the Board of Supervisors later. So your answer was no, you did not apply for the on-technical assistance program from the U.S. Army Engineers, and you did not have a site visit by that organization. Thank you.
And Chris, some redirect, please. Chris, I have the zoning ordinance section in front of me, section 400-847. And if I can direct you to subsection C17, can you read that verbatim?
Emergency services. The applicant shall provide details about any fire suppression system installed in any accessory structure or equipment container associated with the solar power facility. Upon request, the applicant shall cooperate with emergency services to develop and coordinate implementation of an emergency response plan for the solar power facility.
So first question, are there any fire suppression systems planned to be installed in any accessory structure or equipment container?
We will not have any equipment containers.
So thereby there would be no need for any details, or there would be no details related to any fire suppression system. Is that correct?
Correct.
And at the last hearing was a request made by the fire department chief Tippett to provide or cooperate with an emergency services response plan.
Yes.
And you have agreed to do so, correct?
Correct.
And a sample was given of what the final work product would look like based on an emergency response plan from another Samsung project, correct?
Correct.
Thank you very much.
Can't hear you.
Next, Tom Cadelon. Tom, good evening. Can you please reintroduce yourself yet again for the board and members of the public?
Yep, so my name is Tom Cadelon. I'm a civil engineer at Kinley Warren and Associates, and I'm a professional engineer in the state of Pennsylvania.
And you remember that you're still sworn in as part of this proceeding, correct?
Yes.
And your firm and various sub-consultants prepared the various plans, studies, and reports before the board that are the subject of this conditional use application, correct?
That's correct.
And one of those sub-consultants, were they Pure Power Engineering?
That is correct.
And did they prepare a photovoltaic module solar glare study that was included in Exhibit C to the conditional use application?
Yes.
And this was presented to Kimley Horn for presentation in conjunction with the conditional use application, correct?
That's correct.
Did you review this study yourself?
Yes.
And you also reviewed the zoning ordinance, is that correct?
That's correct.
And are you roughly familiar with section 487C8 relative to placement of solar panels and heat, solar radiation, glare not be directed onto other properties, roadways, et cetera?
Yes.
And is it your understanding that the applicant has the burden of demonstrating that application, but then thereafter, upon completion, the township has to review that prior to issuing a certificate of occupancy, is that correct?
That's correct.
So the study, can you explain what the glare study is?
So the glare study is an analysis that determines the impact of how sunlight reflects off of the solar panels to certain observation points that we select around the solar project.
And did this study do so?
Yes.
Can you summarize in lay terms the findings of the study?
So the findings of this study, it looked over about 160 different observation points around the property. These observation points are all related to the residencies and the roadways that are within 500 feet of the property boundary of the solar site. 500 feet is typically a conservative measure to determine if there is a chance for any sort of glare at a nearby residence. The findings of this study show that there is absolutely no sort of concentrated glare that is being reflected on any residence. There's no sort of glint or glare that would provide or cause any permanent eye damage if you were to look at the solar panels at any part of the day. What the analysis did find was that there are cases of low after image effect and possible after image effect. And essentially what that is, what after image effect is pretty much if you were to take a picture and you saw the flash hit your eye. When you close your eye and you see that light, when your eyes are closed, that's typically what an after image effect is. So in this analysis, while the majority of the analysis shows there is a low potential for that, in some areas the report did show that there are small amounts of potential for that type of after image effect. But again, there's no concentrated glare whatsoever coming from these solar panels to nearby residents.
And the glare study considered fixed tilt panels, as was testified, would be used at this project, correct?
That is correct.
And can you as a professional engineer, explain how how glare would occur across a fixed tilt panel in length of time versus a tracking panel?
So with a fixed tilt panel, because the panels are only oriented in one direction, when the sun makes its way from east to west, there's only going to be a certain time where there could be a potential for an after image effect. But at some point, once it reaches a certain level over the horizon, there's no potential for any type of concentrated glare because of the orientation of the panel.
So any glare that occurs would it dissipate or cease as the sun moves across to another location. Is that a fair lay understanding of that?
That's correct.
And then the ordinance uses the term adversely impact other properties as to what glare cannot do. Is that also correct?
That is correct.
So what mitigation measures, and specifically those stated in the study, could be utilized if there is found to be an adverse effect caused by glare?
So what the study is not able to analyze is if you were to put restrictive measures to mitigate glare throughout the site. There's really two things that could mitigate or prevent any type of adverse effect from the solar facility. So one is to reposition the panels in areas that would mitigate the glare, and then another way is to reinforce vegetative screening and vegetative buffering along all of the property lines throughout the solar field to try to block glare from reflecting off the field to nearby residences.
And the buffering that's been submitted as part of our exhibit package and along with the hearing exhibits, is it fair to say it's robust?
Yes.
And do you believe that will based on the information you have, that will sufficiently mitigate any instances of glint or glare within the requirements of the ordinance?
Yes.
And do you also believe that if after construction but prior to review of a certificate of occupancy, any instances could be mitigated by, if necessary, additional planning, screenings, or any of the measures you have mentioned?
Yes.
And is there anything, as far as the thoroughness of the glare analysis? I recall it being about 1,300 pages. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So is that a fairly thorough analysis and data sample to determine whether or not there are adverse impacts of glare from the property?
Yes.
And are you giving that testimony in your capacity as a professional engineer in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
Yes.
And is there anything relative to the glare study that you feel I should have addressed or you'd like to state for the record to assure that the ordinance requirements can be complied with as to glare?
I think we covered it.
All right. And if I may just have one question for Mr. Simmons in follow-up to this to confirm a proposed condition. Play musical microphones. So, Chris, you heard me state that the ordinance requires or allows the township to determine prior certificate of occupancy whether or not any adverse impacts relative to glare or solar radiation occur. Would Samsung agree to comply with that requirement should an adverse impact to glare or glint or solar radiation be found?
Yes.
So that's a will comply?
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Okay, my first question, I guess, is the glare. Did you look at the Chestnut Bridge on the opposite side of 209 facing, or did you stay within the 500 feet?
So the analysis that we did, it covered the entire Polk and Chestnut Hill perimeter. So it did look at those areas as well.
Because I'm thinking, looking across 209, across the valley on that opposite hillside, houses may be facing that it takes direct glare from 2/3 of the site at one time or something like that.
Yeah, I should note that if it was within 500 feet of that property.
No, this is probably a half a mile.
Oh, then
Directly across.
Then we did not analyze, we didn't analyze residences outside of that 500-foot setback from the property line.
Okay, because it's a pretty good valley across there and then that whole hillside. Are these panels, are they like a tinted look to them, or are they more like a mirrored look?
It's not mirrored, they have anti-reflective glass on the outermost layer, but not tinted. The solar wafers themselves are dark. Wafers, the black squares you see on a panel.
All right, I was taking notes during the questions before. What type of fence are we looking, or are you considering putting in?
We are pretty open to working with you on the land development plan on what the actual materials of the fence consist of.
Okay, because I was thinking smaller animals.
Sure.
I hunt back near the Walker Reservoir, and they have like 8-inch square that the small game can go right in and out, rather than a chain link might work.
Yeah, we can do that.
After decommissioning or during the process, are the detention basins, retention basins, whatever we call them, are they going to be removed?
So I think this is something that will be discussed during the land development period in terms of the long-term operation and maintenance agreement. And I think at that time, it'll determine if they will remain in perpetuity or if they will be removed at the time of decommissioning.
Can you explain the restoration? I know we talked about replanting trees. I don't know if the general population knows of the process. I know there was going to be a calculation of trees and.
Yeah, so in the zoning ordinance, there is a requirement, if there is a certain size of tree caliber, that must be counted to be replanted at the time of decommissioning. So any trees that are at a certain caliber will be replanted when the solar facility is removed.
And it's the same type of tree, correct?
That is correct. So not less than 2.5 inches caliber, or 8 feet in height above ground level.
Okay, my next question, I guess, is this additional noise. That seems to be a little bit more of an issue now that we're realizing there's more fans. Is there any way of adding that buffer just in the area where the houses are, if that's going to be something? I kind of picture if this gets approved, you start with 6-foot trees or something like that. Could be a couple of years to fill in. Maybe additional trees near these homes. Is that something that you might be willing to do?
Sure, we can consider that.
Next, I guess, is the construction entrance. We're talking about taking tractor trailers in there. That little lane that currently accesses that field is not going to be sufficient for really any kind of access. When you pull out from Kresge Farm Road, and you want to go left, you really take a deep breath before you try that. So there's, right, all right?
Yeah.
So to pull out into that field, especially with a slow-moving vehicle, I guess construction entrances are going to have to be considered.
Yeah, we'll have to develop with our land development plan, with our land development plan, and work with Pennsylvania Department of Transportation to make sure we have adequate entrances for large equipment.
Yes, I just think it'd be a real issue.
Yeah.
How are the panels connected? I'm sorry. How are the panels connected? Is there a conduit that attaches them that takes the energy to the end of the line?
Yeah, so for ever so many actual panels, they will go to an individual inverter station, and there will be a dedicated AC inverter station per so many panels. All of those inverter stations will send the power through medium voltage cables underground to the substation.
Okay, I guess what I'm getting at is the thought of rodents, squirrels, chipmunks chewing on something. We talk about fires, and most fires occur in the grass, dry season. that the wires under the ground are in some kind of conduit so nothing can actually gnaw and start a fire.
Yes.
How much of the land will actually be disturbed? If the land is 205 acres, are we looking, or are you looking at 150 acres total with the detention basins? Is there any number on that?
I can't recall the actual number off the top of my head, but it's definitely not the entire parcel area. I'd like to say it's possibly half, but I'd like to just, if we have that, to confirm that.
The hardwood forest will remain approximately 102 acres. So that's roughly half, I think.
Yeah.
So, what are the inverters? Are they going to be brought out? Is the power going to come out to Long Mountain, or are they going to go in? If there's going to be fans on those inverters?
The inverter stations are placed within the facility. So when we talk about fans cooling the inverters, you can hear the inverter stations when you're standing right next to them, but as you back away and you get a couple of rows of panels away from them, they become silent. When you're standing at the perimeter of the solar facility itself, it's very indistinguishable from background noise.
Okay, I guess my other note was, I was under the impression no substation in Polk Township. So,
yeah, we'd have to evaluate it just based on the way things are going with Chestnut Hill Township and Polk Township, where the substation is going to go when we actually design our final design for the project itself.
okay, that's just one of the questions I asked before, and the answer was no. Just saying.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I just had two questions. The glare study that was done for fixed panels, is that correct?
That is correct.
Is the applicant committed to putting in fixed panels? I thought I heard testimony earlier that there's still a possibility that the panels could be moving panels.
It is possible that it would be moving.
So if it's moving panels, does it negate this glare study? Because it's a totally different animal if it's a moving panel?
If we were to decide to use the single axis tracker, we would commission a new glare study.
And you referenced that the mitigation of the glare would be by merit of the buffering. Could you be more specific?
Yeah, so currently in the report, where there are signs of glare, the analysis really doesn't take into any type of structures that could possibly block the light from reflecting from the panels to off the property. So the goal of the vegetative screening and the current existing woodlands that are on site would be to act as a buffer to block the potential glare from the panels to reflecting outside of the property.
All right, thank you. Members, are there any other questions? All right, what we're going to do is we're going to turn to the members of the public again. We'll go through the same procedure. I'll call your name, and if you are present, you can ask any questions. And unfortunately, I did take note of who isn't here, so let's say the same names. Some of those folks aren't here. Truman Burnett.
I seem to recall that the previous meeting, you said if you didn't get conditional approval in Chestnut Hill Township, you weren't going to go through it.
Yes. We're still evaluating the...
You were under oath.
We're still evaluating how to move forward with the site and continue working with Chestnut Hill Township if we can.
Is it Joseph Balzano?
Yes.
Any questions, Joe?
Yeah. What do you want from me?
Any questions?
No questions.
Jennifer Carey?
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure. I think that we've touched on this a couple of different times, but I'm still trying to get it in my head. the site is very much on a slope, and I think you just mentioned, you know, there's up the hill and then a valley, and then so it sounds like we're now back to, it could be a moving panel or it could be a fixed panel. So my house, maybe I have no glare straight forward, but from the hillside, there could very well be a different impact. And as much as I appreciate what he's saying about then adding more buffering, it's still a matter of height to, there's no tree that's going to plant there that's going to then buffer from me sitting in the front of my house. So maybe you could just, I mean, 1,300 pages, there must be some answer. If you could just clarify.
I think the one thing to note is probably the angle of the panels. I would say, given the angle of the panels, you know, if there's sunlight coming directly down, it's not going to bounce back up just like that. What I can only testify on today is the observations that we made within 500 feet of the property. Sometimes topography is a little bit out of our control, but I would say given angles of the panels and the reports very much low level of any potential for an after image effect, you know, no potential whatsoever for permanent eye damage, no potential whatsoever for concentrated glare. I wouldn't think there'd be a large concern for maybe houses that are a half mile away. But again, I can really only testify upon what was observed in the report, and that's only within 500 feet of the property line.
Oh yes, my house is closer than 500 feet. So could you tell me, again, I know you're not in the planning stage, but generally speaking, the tilt is in north, south, east, west, what, like how does, I mean, I'm guessing.
So the tilt of,
east.
so these panels, they'll be tilting north, is that correct? They'll be tilting north.
So the face of the panel would be to the north.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Stuart Lockberg?
That's one question. If after these studies and if these things do get put in, what would you do if there is glare? If people are, because I'm right across the road as well as she is, what would you do to help us if there is a glare being, what would you do there?
So with the zoning ordinance, after construction is complete, we do have to make sure we still comply with the glare requirements. And so if there was a finding of potential glare that was not compliant with the zoning ordinance, at that time we would have to create additional measures to mitigate and prevent that.
So Everett Solar would be responsible for getting rid of the glare?
The applicant would be responsible.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. and Mrs. Martini?
I only got just one question. My question is that, you know, every question that's been asked by everybody here, you know, the supervisors and whatnot, y'all give an answer, which we're supposed to believe, under oath, and then somebody says something, and then y'all change your answer to appease, but you said one thing under oath, and then say something else. How can they believe, how can we believe or trust you guys when there's never a definite answer to any question that we give? It always changes. And I understand it's in a building process where we stepping stones in gotta give us some ground laying of something that's honest. I always say if you tell one small lie, I don't trust you. It doesn't matter if it's the smallest lie or the biggest lie, you're lying. So how
Mr.
can we
Martini,
believe
you
you?
have to ask a question.
I just did. How can we believe you? Nobody's answered.
The question is about what the testimony is, not, that's argument, that's not the question.
No,
You can make that point, you can make that point, sir.
Mr.
we
Gary, my
understand.
question was, under oath, they give an answer. How is it that that's being allowed them, that they change their answer? Where's the answer? What answer are you giving?
The supervisors are gonna have to analyze all the testimony and determine what they believe and what
Okay,
they
that's
don't
fine.
believe.
It's still, okay, thank you. Still a question.
I guess my first question is, in the previous hearings, you were told we would have an expert from Pure Power, that I'm assuming would get sworn in, like all of the other experts, going by their, no offense to you, but you didn't do the study, so we had, it's kind of like, still waiting hearsay or second party to be heard from them.
So I wouldn't say it's hearsay as much, because I'm just reflecting all of the data that they provided in their report.
Would there be a possibility, though, that you can interpret the data that they created?
I guess there could be a possibility, but it's really all just data and facts.
Did they go out to the site to do these studies, or is this again a map that they found online of topography and that kind of
This is, what was determined on site was the areas for where to determine observation points, but the analysis itself was done using a software.
Do you know what software it was? Because I read that there were two that are pretty common.
So this one's called Forge Solar PV. I think this is the software that's also used by the FAA.
I'm kind of confused by that because FAA is airplanes.
Correct. So airplanes with their line of travel, they also have to determine if there's any sort of glare.
Which I think would be different from in the air to perhaps.
Yes, that's true, but the observation points are also different based off the software.
You said that you would change it to north facing for, I thought that the initial idea was to have all the panels south facing, to get as much sun exposure throughout the year.
That's my apologies. They angle to the north, but they face to the south. I'm sorry for that.
Okay, and then also you said earlier about the panels having some sort of film or coating on them. How do we know that we don't know what panels we're using at, or that it will definitely have that particular thing? Is that also what was in the study for the glare?
We use a panel that's very similar to anything we select for monocrystalline panels. How they're constructed is very similar across the board. So again, we will provide the full specs to the township and other components.
The glare study, I'm sorry, the last part?
And all of their components.
The glare study was done using monocrystalline panels?
With the anti-reflective material, yes.
From Trina Solar that you had that provided you?
In the study, I do not believe that the panels, like the manufacturing specification is provided, but with an option of using anti-reflective material on the panel, that was used for the analysis.
Are there different types of anti-reflective materials, or are they all the same?
I don't know.
Will you be changing out the panels to keep up the technology?
No, the plan is to keep whatever panels are installed, they're operating for the full life of the project unless they're damaged. About 0.5% per year.
So if they're only 23% efficiency at start, 0.5%
That
every year
it's,
after 4
it's
years.
that is 23% calculates how much sunlight they could collect, and that's off of a 24-hour day. So what you do is you run what's called an 8760. There's 8,760 sunny hours in a year, and we know that for half that time it's dark outside, correct? So that 23% tells you what amount of sunlight you're going to be collecting, how many megawatt hours of energy you're going to be producing in a calendar year in a given area.
Given that it's a sunny year.
So the 23% is not.
Given that it's a sunny year, not cloudy, raining, snowing.
Sure, yeah, that's why it's at 23%.
Should we be looking into our homeowners insurance? We have to notify them if this goes in?
Not to my knowledge, no.
With the substation, if the substation is not going in Chestnut Hill Township as on the plans, and you move it over to the Polk side, do you still have to run some sort of conduit or line to the transmission pole, like to, because it's my understanding that really the high tension lines are going through Chestnut Hill.
Yeah, so the utility would take the power from it's called a collector substation, so we run all of our power to a single location near the transmission line right by it. Then the utility would tap it, they would bring that power over, and they have different methods of doing that.
And would that be under a utility use then, and not township or state?
Yeah, usually the utility facilitates all that.
You talked about glare mitigation by building up the buffer. Earlier we were talking about the natural buffer, but in Pennsylvania, obviously, it feels like we have 6 months of winter, and there aren't any leaves on those trees, so how would that be remediated?
I think we would have to kind of reanalyze at post-construction where we determine where the panels will be and add in these obstacles to see if in that condition if it is adequately mitigating glare. I do know that with this project, where this natural buffer is, it's hundreds and hundreds of feet in length. And so I don't want to make assumptions, but I believe given the overall breadth of the natural vegetation, specifically to the west of this site, even in the winter, I believe would be adequate to mitigate or prevent potential glare.
So driving around this last week, I've seen a lot of fungus, a lot of trees in our neighborhood are dying. Is that going to be a factor in your buffering? Like if the trees after 5 years, half of them have died, would someone be coming back to you about that, or is that only this?
Yeah, I mean, as part of the land development plan in other states where we do visual mitigation screening, that's incorporated into the maintenance plan to make sure that the visual buffer is maintained and doing what it's supposed to be doing throughout the life of the project.
2 more questions. If other sites that I had visited were under construction and they weren't up and running yet, but there were a lot of boxes of broken panels out front, how quickly will those be removed from the property, and how are they disposed of if you don't have recycling available yet?
I'm not sure, to be honest, so we'll have to get a response to that during our LDP.
My concern is broken panels, if they were to have any toxic substances in that leaching into the groundwater. So I just want to make that point. And lastly, the plans and all of the studies that were done, I think just a lot of it is combining the townships, but I'm confused as if this is only conditional use only for Polk Township. Why those are, I think it's confusing a lot of people because it's shown in all of the plans. Even the agricultural studies, historical studies, are all mentioning Chestnut.
Do you want to talk technical?
Yeah, so initially, when this project was conceived, it was Polk Township and Chestnut Hill Township. So looking at this as a whole, I think some of the initial studies and making sure that there's ample room for stormwater management, while each township has its own set of ordinances and requirements, if this were to be constructed as a whole, we have to be prepared to make sure that everything would work and function. Now, if it's just going to be Polk Township, right now it's just the zoning. That doesn't mean the underlying assumptions are flawed or should be thrown out, because it's based on a larger scale, but also for the conditional use was reevaluated to make sure that we meet the requirements of the conditional use, and we'll have to go back and reprove through the land development that yes, if conditional use is granted, we meet the use requirements of the conditional use and any conditions, and then demonstrate that we meet the saldo requirements. And did I miss anything, or is there anything else that I should have added?
If you are making this project and it's different property owners with adjoining properties, they don't have to have a lot owner to fence in all of it together, or is it going to be fenced separately per parcel?
So would there be fences between each lot?
Is it going to be a congruent fence going all the way through everybody's lots? And if so, then would you need to have a lot joiner to get a fencing permit?
So it's a leasehold. So the overall lease governs each requirement with the individual property owner. So as part of that lease, allows them to run fences across property lines and allow this to be considered one entire solar facility.
So the lease is the same for each individual tenant, like lease don't change? I thought in the beginning you said there was option to purchase, option to lease, or different lease types.
Do you mind filling in?
I mean, for this project, so in solar in general, you can use a combination of option to lease or option to purchase.
Sorry.
In solar in general, you can use a combination of option to lease and option to purchase, but for Effort Solar, we are leasing the site. Or do we have option to purchase? We do have option to purchase on it, sorry. But the facility designs, and we are, we do fence off the entire perimeter of the project. If properties are separated, then usually you have to connect it via an underground easement. We don't have that situation on here for Effort Solar, where we have to connect isolated or islanded properties. So we fence off the project as one. Now, when a lease gets terminated, even if we have the option to purchase on the other property, we still have to decommission the facility and remove everything, so the fence is back to anything like we own. But we would logically, at the end of the life period of the project itself, decommission everything. Is that it?
So if one person backs out in this, you have to redo fences on the property?
Yes.
Thank you.
Michael McMurky.
Thank you. The glare study that was prepared by Pure Power cites 3 individuals with positions by abbreviation and the individuals by initial. Can you explain that the positions identified the responsibilities of each and identified the individuals responsible?
I cannot.
Can that information be provided to us at a later time or supplementally?
Yes.
The study that was conducted indicates panels at a height of 5 feet. And again, there's apparently been a change in the plan, so the fixed scope and orientation are fixed, which is concurrent with what you just mentioned. However, the height of the solar panels, based upon the information we provided, will be between 15 and 19 feet high. Does that change the effects of the glare study sufficient that a revised glare study would be needed?
Just to confirm, you're not referring to the height of the observation points, you're referring to the height of the solar panels?
It's my understanding from reading the report that that was the height of the solar panels, correct?
If there is a change in height, there could be a change in, there probably could be a change in glare, but I don't think if it's within a certain threshold, it wouldn't be a sufficient change.
Okay. So there was no threshold that I could identify in the plan, but 1,300 pages or whatever it is, there's a little bit to read through. So if there's a way you can get back to us of what that threshold, that study remains effective, that would be helpful to understand the study. The study also focused on the effect of glare on neighboring properties and roadways. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Under the township's ordinance, the owner or operator has the burden of proving that any solar radiation or glare produced does not adversely impact upon other properties, aircraft, flying species, and/or adjacent areas, either through siting or mitigation. Since this study focused on glare on just the neighboring properties and roadways, how do you anticipate meeting the requirements of the ordinance for the other items, as well as the effect of any solar radiation as described in the ordinance.
If there is additional observation points beyond what is provided in the report that would want to be added to this, we can certainly do that.
Not quite sure that answers how you'll meet the ordinance, but I'll leave that up to the supervisor to decide. Are we also allowed to ask questions of the other experts while they're here and not just the Blair study?
Everybody else
We've been doing
has.
it. So.
Everybody else has.
In regards to the wildlife study that Mr. Ozirkas testified to, the ordinance requires that the applicant take all reasonable measures to determine any affected species and whatnot. As you testified, the study prepared through PNDI only indicates mitigation requirements for the Indiana bat. However, in using the PNDI site, you can use the mapping feature in that to disclose other potential habitats of affected species. Did you use that mapping feature to identify other species that might be affected, even though they were not identified through the study itself?
Yes, the Indiana bat and the northern lonely bat were the only results we got from these agencies, but the screening itself included many more species.
Okay, so as I said, I ran the report myself using what I guessed the parameters were that you were, and I came up with a substantially similar report, including the mitigation requirements. However, if you use the mapping feature, it indicates potential habitat for the bald eagle, for bog turtles, northeastern bulrush. In contact with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they indicated that no mitigation came up for these species because there have been no reported sightings within the property or within the buffer around the property. However, I believe, and I'll ask the township this, I think all reasonable measures would include an on-site study to determine if these species were not there or that nests were not there. It's been noted several times during this hearing the sightings of bald eagles in the area. I myself have seen them in the area. I think that is a reasonable measure that could be taken or should be taken to make sure that these species are not now there, because the Wildlife Service doesn't go out and make periodic studies. They use what's reported to them, at least based on the information I got from the Wildlife Service when I contacted them.
I will note that bog turtle and northeastern bulrush inhabit exclusively wetlands, and this project does not propose any impacts to wetlands.
Lastly, are you aware that the study that you used expired in November?
We could rerun it if requested, but as you said, you received the same result.
In your testimony, you stated that there's, and you stated also today, that there's plenty of surrounding area for wildlife to move to if they're displaced by the project, meaning wildlife that's not considered endangered or protected. In making such a statement, did you consider where the wildlife already existing in the areas you believe they could be displaced to, and the effect both on the wildlife that would have to move there and the wildlife that already exists in those areas?
That level of detail was not considered, but the habitat requirements of these species were taken into account, and I believe I testified previously that these habitats that these common species inhabit are common habitat types and exist in the vicinity of the project site.
Did you consider the needs of the wildlife in regard to range and sustenance in making that conclusion?
I'm sorry, say that again?
I said, did you consider the needs of the wildlife in regard to range and sustenance? So when you have their habitat disrupted by the placement of these large fields of solar panels, the normal areas that they would travel are going to be highly disrupted. The ability of prey that's available to hunting animals is going to be severely disrupted. Did you consider any of that in your statements that there's plenty of other places for this wildlife to go?
I would argue that some of them operate on a much larger scale, and this solar farm may be insignificant compared to their range, but no, that level of detail was not considered.
Did you also consider in those statements the surrounding residential properties which may be impacted by the wildlife that's disrupted? As is noted, Mr. Martini's attack, but also all the residents in the area. Very few of them are fenced in, so wildlife that's going to be moved from current habitat is likely to go through these residential properties that are not otherwise protected by screening fences or whatnot.
I suppose that's a possibility, but it's also possible that they will retreat into the significant area of existing forest, in other directions.
In your study, you noted that there is no impact to the rural character of the area. Would you argue that for the homes that are adjacent to and adjoining the properties that are affected, that the character of their property is not changed with the input of the solar panels versus the fields or the forested land that currently exists?
That was analyzed on a larger scale. We're talking about the rural character of the area as a whole and not a single parcel or landowner. And as I testified previously, my conclusion was related to the density of development and not one single project.
There are over 30 homes that are adjacent to or adjoining the property that's proposed. So I'm one of those homeowners, and there are several of them here. So we would argue that the character of our property is changed by this project and to be considered by the supervisors.
I second that.
Doug Swink. Lisa Bracelin.
I have no question.
Valerie Burnett. Not here. Josh Barrett.
Not here.
Christy Goff.
I'm here, still have nothing useful.
Joanne Valentine.
Yes, with the glare study, is it, so to understand the surface of the panel, is there reflection on it? Does it give off reflection? Oh, sorry, does it give off reflection? Is there a reflection?
It does give off some reflection. The anti-reflective material is to help mitigate that reflection off the things.
So, the study is conducted using these points at within 500 feet or within 500 feet. So if we're coming up the road, that's more than 500 feet, or the road on the other side of the valley, that's more, or aircraft, if you direct some recreational flyers and everything too. So is that being considered, or part of it, the study? 'Cause I didn't see the study on top of it.
So for the sake of this report, the analysis was all residences and roadways within 500 feet of the entire property.
So with this study, it said it's the one the FAA,
I'm sorry, ma'am, Ms. Valentine, question again?
You referenced the FCC, or the FAA, sorry.
The FAA.
So with the tilt of the panels, is that taken into consideration? If you're only doing the study from ground in 500 feet, we haven't looked at it from other perspectives. Can that be performed or completed by you guys?
We can certainly look into that. But I think for the purpose of this zoning hearing, we wanted to analyze the adjacent homeowners and any type of patrons who would be using the roadways nearby the solar site.
I don't know, just as my understanding, I haven't experienced solar fields. But you know, when you're at night and we're up and outside or down the road from this field, when you're coming from on the corner there, we can see Blue Mountain. There's a glow at night, we know when Blue Mountain's open, right? So is there during the day a greater sense of light with these panels? I don't know how to really phrase that. Do they give off, we're talking about giving off more heat, do they also give off more light besides glare? I don't know if I'm...
So I guess based off of this study, I can only speak upon glint and glare. I think light, it might be too broad for me to make a statement on. But yeah, this study was just focused on glint and glare, which is more the kind of things that shape the impacts of glint and glare. A lot of it is determined just by the angle of the sun. And so where it is in the sky, I think that's a large determination of how the glare reflects off of the panels. But light in general, I'm not sure I can comment on that.
I mean, we don't go staring at the sun because you're talking about the after image effect, so with this, but anybody on the panel who's around, I know I'm not talking just about the sun, but would any of you have experience building these farms or fields or factories, whatever we're calling it? Do you notice glare? Do you notice it's brighter there? Anybody on the panel?
I mean, the facilities I've visited aren't any kind of, nothing, I've never seen anything like intense glare when I walk into a solar facility on a sunny day. Okay, that's your question.
Terry Klingel. I have just one question. Something that everybody's kind of like beating around the bush about, but I'm going to right out and ask. How can you do an accurate glare study without the solar panels actually being there to visualize the glare coming off?
And sir, if I may, that's why the ordinance has a requirement that we demonstrate it and then
But I'm saying, you said you had a visual glare analysis. How can you analyze it if they're not there?
Sure, and that's exactly the point we're trying to express, and I'm sorry if I failed, that there are requirements that can't be done or can't be verified until after installation. So the testimony and reports are given. Glare, there's the modeling program that the FAA relies on is what is used based on a coated solar, a non-reflective coated solar panel, and then taking points around the facility, which yes, we absolutely have to, per the ordinance, re-verify it once it's installed and make sure it's not negatively impacting other property owners.
So actually what you're saying is you have no idea what kind of glare we're going to get.
No, that's not true. Ms. Calehan.
You have an analysis, but there's no panels.
Well, to be fair, there's not a objective standard for glare. It's not like sound, like a decibel or something that has a firm standard. It's the perception of the glare, which is why they give it red, yellow, and green characteristics. And I think I understand the question, the concern, and I think you want to say what you said last time, but this is, I know it's not a satisfactory answer, but I think that's why the ordinance was drafted in such a way to make sure that these things are approved after installation.
All right, no more questions.
All right, thanks, sir.
Al German?
Yes, I have a couple. These studies that we're hearing, did Polk Township do any of these studies? You haven't done any? Just that side, okay. I just like to know if they're verified. We're hearing from one side. I mean, Polk Township hasn't done any studies at all?
You got your answer to that question.
Okay.
Next question.
Okay. The substations. I thought initially you needed water to cool down the substations. I thought in the prior testimony that was brought up. So you're not going to be tapping into the well water?
No.
Okay, and then someone mentioned that they were talking to Chestnut Hill recently. Someone did mention it here about, you were going back, I spoke to them about a month ago, and they said ever since they had their vote, no one has contacted them.
No, we have not contacted, we'd like to
Okay.
re-engage. I think what you heard Mr. Simmons say earlier was that we'd like to.
He did say that they were in contact. He didn't say they'd like to. I did hear it.
No, I mean, our plan is to continue trying to work with Chestnut Hill Township.
Because they said it was
a.
they were negative on it.
Understood.
And the reflection of the panels, the glare, which direction would that be focused? The study.
So the study it analyzed every house, every roadway within 500 feet of the entire property line. So it did an analysis at every single point, regardless of where the panels are tilted at.
I mean, would they focus like north, south, the glare? I mean, is there a certain direction?
It really more depends on the time of day. So as the sun moves across the sky, the glare can also, or the chance of glare can also change depending on where the sun is.
Because my lot that we're talking about does have a foundation dug. And I would, my lot has a foundation that was dug. And I just want to know if that's going to be affected.
If it's near your residence and it's within 500 feet of the property, I can determine that.
Okay. Definitely is. That's all I have.
Frank Bruns, Lorelei Fox, Tom Manzo, Dr. Vasquez. She left.
Yes.
Alfred Haywood, Robert Caffrey, Gary Stroll.
Yeah. On all these surveys that you had done, was it done by independent companies or was it done by your company?
I think we would have to define each of the surveys.
With the glare, all that?
So the glare, that was done by a sub-consultant from a different company.
An independent company or are they connected to you?
They're independent.
Okay. Catherine Folio. Deb Modica.
I just have two this time. So in July, Mr. Sun testified, he was asked the question, where do you have solar farms in the United States? And Mr. Sun testified, West Virginia, Virginia, Ohio, and Kentucky. Last hearing I asked, and you said you had solar farm in California and Ontario. And now tonight, the other gentleman testified that Samsung has 5 in the United States. What is it? What is the true answer?
So Ohio, West Virginia, everything in PJM territory is in a development phase. That's the projects he's talking about. That's our portfolio. So we have early stage projects that we're trying to develop and get constructed. The only operational assets that we built in the U.S. were the 5 projects he's talking about in California.
So the 5 projects are in California?
Yes, ma'am.
That's it?
Yes, ma'am.
In no other state in the United States?
Yes, ma'am.
And then the other question would be, are you having lights around the solar field for safety at night?
I don't believe anything's planned right now. The only time lighting at night, so we have seen lighting around the entrances, especially for, first responder situations or stuff like that, because you want to see the knock spots lit up or anything, but it'd be very low light. But no facility lights throughout the facility itself.
So you have no plans for them at this time?
No, ma'am.
Then my other question, because I was going to ask you, will they be motion activated or always on at night? That would be the other question. Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am.
Susan Perozzi. Louis Carbona.
understand a little bit about a comment that was made about possibly changing it from fixed panels to movable panels. So you submitted an application, you provided studies on fixed panels, that's the current status, but you might change the type of panels to movable?
The panels wouldn't change, just the racking system, and it's...
But they would move. The panels might be the same panels, but you, in the racking system, might actually move the panels.
They could. Again, we are modeling, we're planning on fixed them.
Okay, well, I understand the will comply issue. If you find after it's built there are glare issues to residences, you will mitigate that. How many feet from the 500 feet did you take readings, or another question would be, how many linear feet of roadway is in that 500 feet, and are you actually going to agree with the township if they say, well, if there's glare on the roads and people who are driving are going to have low after image effects, that you'll actually will comply and do mitigation for the roads too, also?
Yeah, I mean...
So, and the ordinance clear, we can't get a certificate of occupancy unless we satisfy the township.
Okay, so that's what I'll be asking them, to make sure roads are also included, not just the residences.
Yes, sir.
All right. Are the applicants aware that there are vertical solar panels that are being incorporated in Sweden and other European countries, and they have solar backing, and they're about 4% more power that comes from, I'm sure that they're going to cost more money. But when you say that you might actually change the racking, I would think that maybe Samsung would come up with a plan that says we'll invest more money because in the long run we'll make more money if we put vertical panels, and then the glare study would have to be attained because if they're vertical, and I'm thinking there's probably less glare if they're vertical. So, you know, maybe that's something Samsung might come to this supervisor and say we might actually reconsider from the tilted panels to the vertical panels. But if you do that, just make sure that we know that the glare studies would actually be part of that. It was brought up again about trees, and I just wanted to make a point because I think the applicant's testimony wasn't clear. The applicant used words about certain sizes and calibers. So in the ordinance, I think it's C subparagraph 21 that talks about the trees 8 inches or more in diameter at 4.5 feet off the ground, and they shall be replaced on a 1-to-1 basis. The ordinance says of a native species. You comment about like replacing by the same type. I'm imagining that if it's an ash tree, you're not going to be able to replace ash trees, but as long as they're native to the property, you'll be able to put that in your decommissioning plan. But my biggest question I asked at the last hearing, do you have a plan to give the supervisors a count of those trees? Do you have some kind of plan before you build to actually quantify and qualify the decommissioning plan on how many and what type of trees?
Yes.
Can you be more specific?
So we will, before we do tree removal or make commitments to replace those trees, we want to have a professional, look at the property and tell us the count, species, and things like that.
So like a licensed arborist or someone that's qualified, and you'll actually get a count, they'll go out and they'll measure the whole 100 and whatever acres.
Yes, sir, because we need to know what we need to replace.
All right, thank you.
April 4th, yes?
I have a couple questions. You guys are going to be bringing heavy equipment in here. You're going to have triaxles up in the roads and stuff. These are township roads. They're going to get damaged. You guys are going to pay to replace our roads that you're damaging? These are small roads. They're not meant for the weight.
So, before the land development plans can be fully recorded, there will be discussions about operation and maintenance of the roads that will be used during construction.
Is there like some kind of escrow account that we can force them to hold money into for damages so that we can pull the money out when they damage our roads? Because why should I, as a township member, have my taxes paid for roads that they damaged, that they're making millions of dollars on? Why am I paying for them to make millions of dollars? Why?
We can't ask
So-
for a bond.
Yes. Also, another question, we have a lot of pollen in this area. And you guys are saying, oh, well, they'll get cleaned off with the rain and the wind and stuff. Well, sometimes we don't get rain for 2 weeks. These things are gonna be covered in pollen. Or are you gonna come in and clean them? Like, what are you gonna do about it?
Yeah, like we had discussed earlier, if we needed to, if they got so covered that they weren't producing well, we would have to truck in water. And that would have to all be outlined in the land development.
And you're only using water, you're not using chemicals or solvents?
Correct.
Also, I'm just adding this in there, you're saying there was no wetlands and stuff, and this is more sort of on like the Chestnut Hill side. On Cresky Farm Road, you can see right from the road that there's 2 ponds. So, and those turtles could travel from those ponds to those woods back and forth because it's right behind it. You're taking away their habitat. So, without actually going there and checking it out physically and having somebody survey all the areas, you do not know that.
I delineated all the wetlands on the property. I am well aware of all the wetlands.
You
Well, I
said there's no
stated-
wetlands, and I know I can see.
No, I stated there was no wetland impacts proposed as part of the project.
There are a lot of watercourse features on this site, but we do not plan to impact any of it.
Oh, where'd Janet go? Where's your little list? Oh, now, you're kind of going back and forth here. You said, oh, they're gonna be fixed, oh, they're gonna be, you know, oscillating, whatever they're doing. Now, all metal components mostly have lubrication on them to stop them from rusting and stuff like that. Now, what kind of lubrication are we gonna use on this? Now, when it rains and we have runoff and it's going into our soil, you're gonna have to do like periodic like soil tests and stuff to make sure you're not contaminating stuff around it, because there are farms right around the area, and if there's runoff going into these creeks, they're feeding people's livestock. It's dangerous. So I would be concerned about that. Even if you have a retaining pond that's catching that water, but now that water that normally would have flowed down into those creeks, now those creeks might dry up. You're mitigating it and you're changing waterways.
You need to ask a question at this time,
Okay.
if you have one.
So, how often, lubricate the rotation, do you need to lubricate the rotation motors on the poles? How often? How is this done?
I cannot speak to that, but that's something we'd have to address.
This one was already discussed. Where's the transmission point in Polk? You couldn't tell us. Also, is there a GPS coordination or coordinated, and how far is the substation from the transmission line? You guys can answer that either, so moving on. Colin, not that one. Given the density of the houses in the area, how would the fire department be assured enough volunteers? Not all fires might be started by the panels. Now, you're gonna take resources away from residents here if your panels catch on fire. Are you going to hire and pay a firefighter for us? Are you gonna pay for an extra truck? Because now my house is burning down, but they can't save my house because they're doing something over at your solar field instead. And you guys are making residents, and we're paying for this. This is coming out of our taxes.
Again, we will have to coordinate with local first responders in the township when we develop our emergency
I
response
feel
plan.
like that's not unreasonable for you to pay for a full-time firefighter for us in a truck.
Understood.
Soil testing, it should be done. Who's gonna do the soil testing? And who's gonna test the well water and stuff? Because that needs to be done before, periodically, and then after you guys leave. And I, for one, do not want you guys hiring somebody to do the testing. Our township should hire them and you should reimburse them. So, I don't know if that's something you're willing to do. Because we shouldn't be footing the bill for it, but I certainly don't trust you people to do it. So, would that be added in on the bond or something?
We'll comply with applicable laws and township ordinances.
Oh, also, why don't we have an overhead so that like they can actually, you can see what they're talking about? Like, it'd be nice to see the actual properties and surrounding areas. And why didn't I get a paper? You guys handed out papers to other residents, and I didn't get a paper. You handed out packets.
I ran 20 copies, I'm sorry.
You only ran 20 copies? How many people were here? How many residents? Okay. Okay. Why did you not pull out of the PJMQ for a feasible study in Chestnut Hill?
I don't understand the question. Why did we?
Want to explain it to me a little bit? Why did you not pull out of the PJMQ for a feasible study in Chestnut Hill? I think that's the last question.
At this time, we don't feel the need to withdraw the application with PJ.
That's all I had. Oh, actually one more. I don't know how you guys, would you want to live next to a solar field with your children?
I'm a solar developer, of course I would.
Yeah, you're going to put them 100 people on the solar panel?
All right, it's 9 o'clock. I have one more question. You were talking about tree removal. I don't know if there's a plan on how you're going to remove the trees that you're actually going to stump removal. All out, buried.
Nobody can hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me? That's funny.
Yeah, tree removal, stump removal, and then also the overburden. If you're gonna plant some kind of grass, I guess the overburden would have to come off, correct? How can you make grass grow on root matting?
That we would have to make sure that the land would be applicable for the proposed land cover that we want to implement.
Okay, because that's a lot of material to take out, that's what a big concern is.
Real quick.
Go ahead, real quick, one more.
The reverberation from counting the piles into the ground would affect our watershed or aquifers, groundwater.
I have never seen that in any of the studies for a solar project. That is a good question, and we can look into that. Yes, sir.
Mr. Fox, do you have any other witnesses?
I have no other witnesses, and I would ask that all of our exhibits be moved from the evidence, and the only that has to have a call out to submit is if any of the objectors put on the case and there's need for rebuttal.
Okay, thank you. The members of the board, I recommend that we receive the exhibits subject to our examination and review. Members of the board, I believe that we should accept the exhibits subject to our review, and I would ask that motion be made to that effect. All in favor? Okay, the exhibits are received. And do you rest your case, Mr. Fox?
Rest, and if I may, a brief close at the appropriate time.
Okay, well, I'm going to right now discuss where we go from here. As I indicated at the beginning, we're going to have a hearing on April the 2nd of 2024 at 6 p.m. at this same location. The purpose of that hearing, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be for you folks to present whatever evidence that you have, that you want the supervisors to consider in adjudicating this matter. You can make a statement. You can submit exhibits into evidence that we could review. You could even present a witness if you would like to do that. I would emphasize that if you are going to present any documents, that you bring those documents with you, and you provide one to the applicant, and you provide one to us, and you have one or maybe multiple copies for people in the room, like Mr. Fox did. I would ask that we're going to try to do this in an orderly fashion. We're going to try to finish it in 3 hours on April the 2nd, so we don't have to come back for another session here, though. If that has to be done, it has to be done. I would ask you to make your presentation as organized and concise as possible so that everybody can understand it, and to not be repetitive with each other. And hopefully we'll be able to complete that process on April the 2nd. When that process is over, I am going to allow anybody who is listed as a participant, that's the names that I read off, to submit to us a memorandum or brief or summary of what you think the supervisor should do, what reasons you think it should be denied or granted, or what conditions you think need to be imposed. Well, we would like to take all of that from you. And Mr. Fox, we also would like that from the applicant to submit proposed findings of fact and conclusions of law. And we will then, at that proceeding, we are going to announce a date where the supervisors will meet and will deliberate this. And we are permitted by law to go into an executive session to do that, and we intend to do that. However, when we make the decision, it will be at a public meeting. It will be, you folks will know about it, and we probably will do that here, and there'll be a vote on it, and that will conclude the matter. So that with that, I will, Mr. Fox, do you have anything else?
The findings of facts, and we want that at the year second.
No, it could be afterwards, because you're not going to know what's going to be presented. So we can address that at that proceeding. So with that, we're going to close the hearing tonight. Yep, Mr. German?
I have one question. The application that's on file, does that have to be amended or whatever, since?
The applicant is in charge of whatever their application is. If they seek to amend it, they could do that or ask to do that. If they don't do that, it is what it is, and the supervisors are going to have to make a decision based upon what's been submitted.
I'm trying to clarify, because you said this is like an application just to see if solar will work in this area, or that the application where it shows the substations in Chestnut Hill.
That's something that the supervisors will have to deal with when we make the decision. And if you believe, or if anybody believes that we can't approve it with the way it is now, then you can make that argument to us, and we will consider that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
We ask the people that come back, like, I can't hear everybody, and I don't want to wait for the transcript, it'll be too late. And maybe a mic stand.
Yeah, we will look into that, sir. Okay. All right. So I just want to make clear, April the 2nd at 6 o'clock will be the next proceeding. We'll see everybody then.